Chapter 269. Is that Tai Chi? Wu Zhang Shifang, who was having a secret conversation with Zhu Wudao in the study room, looked up at the sky and suddenly saw a Tai Chi image formed by two white and black clouds in the distant sky. Yes, it's really a Tai Chi. Zhu Wudao also looked at it curiously and sighed. This world is really unpredictable. I didn't expect that there are clouds that can evolve into the appearance of Tai Chi naturally. We have to be in awe. Sure enough, Zhu Wudao was the most suitable candidate for the chairman of the Sword Council. As soon as he opened his mouth, there was a strong smell of chicken soup. Chumph, Senior Baiju, don't you think there's something wrong with this cloud? Wu Zhang Shifang looked at this Tai Chi cloud very cautiously. It seemed that there were many shocking secrets hidden in it. Color. A bright light flashed in Zhu Wudao's cloudy eyes. Now that you mention it, there is indeed something wrong with that half of the black cloud. Its color is too black. This shouldn't be a situation where the sun can't pass through because the cloud is too thick. Could it be that the true color of this cloud is black? This is not a cloud. This is someone fighting. Looking at this, it is at least a battle between spirit sword level swordbearers. Wu Zhang Shifang said. When he first saw this Tai Chi cloud, he felt that it was not a normal cloud. It was a scene of people fighting. Look, you are in the direction of the Miling mountain range. If there is a spirit sword level swordbearer fighting, then they would report to me immediately. However, I haven't received any information yet. Perhaps some spirit sword level swordbearers are too bored to practice their swordsmanship. Zhu Wudao said casually. With his control of Yuzhang City, it was impossible for a spirit sword level battle to be hidden from him. Miling mountain range? Wu Zhang Shifang pondered for a moment. Senior Baiju, we have finished what we wanted to talk about. The matter has also been agreed upon, so it's time for me to complete my original task. Has the swordbearer left by Tian Tsongyun in the Luoting mineral vein woken up? My prince seed is still with him. Well. Upon hearing Wu Zhang Shifang ask about Guhan, and that the prince seed was involved, Zhu Wudao's expression changed drastically. Sword Immortal Shifang, what did you say? The prince seed is with the swordbearer? That's right. Although he said that the prince seed was with his friend, I reckon that the prince seed should still be with him. He's a cunning child, but it's a pity that he's too young. Otherwise, he would be a good material. Alright, I'll have to trouble Senior Baiju to bring him here. After I've obtained the prince seed, I'll have to return to Yangjing City. Lord Haotian is still waiting for me to report back. Why didn't you tell me earlier that the prince seed was in him? Zhu Wudao was so angry that his beard curled up. The people in the Luoting mineral vein reported to me that the kid disappeared together with the medical cabin. Missing. Could it be that this kid has been blinded by benefits and still thinks that he can keep that grand prince seed? Wu Zhang Shifang snorted coldly. He thought that Guhan couldn't bear to part with the prince seed and had escaped after waking up. No, 10 minutes after we left there, I got the news that the medical cabin was missing. With that kid's injury, it's impossible for him to climb out by himself without an hour or two of treatment. He should have been carried away by someone else. Zhu Wudao's expression was very ugly. It seems that in addition to you, Wu Zhang Shifang, there's a second group of forces that has taken a fancy to this prince seed. That stinky kid is likely to have been taken away by them. Longsha Jendi. There was a trace of haze in Wu Zhang Shifang's eyes. If Longsha Jendi was also involved, then this task would not be so easy to complete. At least, it would be impossible for him to set off for Yangjing City tonight. Zhu Wudao was really an old fox. In the blink of an eye, he came up with the most likely answer. Unfortunately, he guessed wrong this time and also led Wu Zhang Shifang into a ditch. The person who took Guhan away did not take a fancy to Guhan's prince seed, but to Guhan's Qingpin sword. What a powerful force. The moment the Tai Chi yin-yang cloud appeared in the sky, Rina Takasaka instantly jumped up from Guhan's body. Holding the sword in her hand, she stared at the direction of the Tai Chi yin-yang cloud with rapt attention, as if an extremely terrifying opponent was hiding there. Rina Takasaka did not speak. She closed her eyes and began to listen to the wind around her. She heard the sound of feet stepping on weeds and branches mixed with the wind, which meant that someone was walking around. However, The thing that Rina Takasaka was most afraid of happened. Even with her control over the wind, she was unable to determine where the sound was coming from. It was as if there were countless people walking toward her from all directions, from the 9 heavens to the 10 earths. Unable to get an answer from the wind, Rina Takasaka could only open her eyes and use them to look for traces of the approaching person. But the tall grass that was originally intended for concealment became an obstacle to Rina Takasaka's vision, making it impossible for her to see the situation around her. Fall. A strong gust of wind blew around Takasaka Rina, forming a fierce gust of wind in a small area. The reason why it was called a gust of wind was because the wind was as sharp as a knife. Even if it was a tree trunk as thick as 2 adults hugging it, it would still be cut down by the gust of wind in an instant, not to mention weeds and shrubs. When the gust of wind ended, everything within a 1-kilometer radius was cut down at the roots. Her field of vision instantly widened, and there was nothing blocking her view. With the help of the gust of wind, Rina Takasaka finally got a clear look at the opponent that made her lose control over the wind. It was a beautiful girl with a cold face. Her figure was exquisite, and her breasts were plump but not exaggerated. It was the perfect size for a girl. Her waist was extremely slender, and her 2 beautiful legs were slender and charming. A pair of bare feet as white as milk was standing on the fragrant green grass. The clothes that the girl wore were rather thin, or rather, tattered. Her top only covered a little below her breasts, and the sleeves only covered a little above her arms. Below her breasts, large patches of skin and skin glistened under the gaze of the naked eye. The pants that covered her legs were also very short, only a little below the triangular area, not much longer than a pair of hot pants. Moreover, this pair of trousers seemed to be very narrow. It was tightly stretched on the thighs, and the edge of the trousers wrapped around the plump thighs into a perfect circle of flesh. All in all, the clothes that the girl was wearing were all childlike in style and length. It was as if she was wearing clothes from her childhood. It was so incongruous, and so sexy. Her skin seemed to be carved out of jade, and one could faintly see a kind of radiance shining on her skin. She was like a perfect girl who had walked out of one of the 3 great Asian arts: plastic surgery, makeup, and Photoshop. Just by standing there, she seemed to represent the pinnacle of a girl's beauty. Seeing her, even Rina Takasaka, who had never cared about her appearance, could not help but feel a sense of inferiority. Even if she took off her disguise and revealed her true self, she still felt that her beauty was not even 1/10 of that girl's. However, the girl's appearance was very familiar. The more Rina Takasaka looked at her, the more she felt that she resembled a certain girl. Especially the short children's clothes that she was wearing, Rina Takasaka couldn't be more familiar. "You're Qingpin?" Rina Takasaka asked in disbelief. That's right, the girl's appearance was like a child's version of Qingpin. And the clothes that she was wearing were the same ones that Qingpin was wearing, so there was no mistaking it. "You've made my body angry, woman." Qingpin slowly walked up to Rina Takasaka and spoke with a sweet voice. It was completely different from Qingpin's childish voice. From her voice alone, this girl did not resemble Qingpin at all. "Then, please go to hell." She clearly had the appearance of a young girl, but when she spoke, there was a monstrous murderous aura akin to that of a giant beast. As soon as Qingpin finished speaking, the flowers and trees that Rina Takasaka had cut earlier floated into the air and shot toward Rina Takasaka like arrows. "It's powerful, but these ordinary things can't hurt me." Rina Takasaka didn't care about the attacks from the flowers and trees at all. Only Yuan Ku's or the Sword Maiden's swords could hurt her. Apart from them, these flowers and trees couldn't possibly hurt her. Before Rina Takasaka could finish her thoughts, the tree that was closest to her had already struck her face, leaving a blood-red mark on her originally translucent face. "This is impossible. How can this hurt me?" Rina Takasaka exclaimed in shock. In the next moment, even more branches and flowers fell on Rina Takasaka. Caught off guard, Rina Takasaka was buried deep in those things. They piled up a few meters high, looking like a grave made of trees. At the same time, when Rina Takasaka was buried, Ji Yuhan's body that was lying on the side instantly disappeared. In the next moment, he reappeared at the girl's feet, saving Ji Yuhan from the most dangerous situation possible. Wind. A few seconds later, a strong gust of wind erupted from the inside of the tree graveyard, blasting all the trees apart and sending them flying in all directions. When the smoke dissipated, Rina Takasaka stared at the girl in front of her. Only now did she realize that Rina Takasaka had transformed from a little brat that she had been playing with to an opponent that could rival her. No wonder he wanted me to take you away, even at the cost of cutting off his hair. So you're so powerful, Chingpin. Rina Takasaka finally understood why the Fleeting Time family was so desperate to get their hands on the sword of Chingpin. I don't know what you're talking about, but you can die now. Chingpin looked at Rina Takasaka as if she was looking at a dead person. She waved her hand, and 20 leaves flew up from the ground. The leaves gathered in the air and combined into the shape of a lotus. Lotus floats, scattering the 9 hells. Even Chingpin was starting to like the names of those Chunibya moves. Chapter 270. Rina Takasaka looked at the white lotus dancing in the air with an intoxicated expression on her face. It was clearly a lotus formed from green leaves, but it was as white as jade, pure and flawless. The white lotus was so pure that when Rina Takasaka looked at it, she could not help but have the urge to kneel down. It was as if the white lotus was the supreme deity of the world. What the hell? Rina Takasaka trembled as she snapped out of her reverie. Her eyes were filled with fear as she looked at the white lotus. The lotus was simply too terrifying. Break. Rina Takasaka's clothes began to flutter violently as a dozen wind blades shot out from her body, attacking the white lotus in the air. In Rina Takasaka's eyes, it was just a few leaves that had been forcefully put together. Under her wind blades, it would immediately be sliced into pieces. You're overestimating yourself. Chingpin snorted coldly. She treated Rina Takasaka's attack as if it were a toy or a remote control car. The topmost leaf on the white lotus flower that was formed by 20 leaves slowly floated down. Rina Takasaka's wind blades had yet to reach her, but the aura of the wind blades seemed to have scared the leaf off. Intercept. The young girl's delicate red lips spat out slightly, and the falling leaf suddenly burst into flames. Then, it quickly burned into ashes, and was blown away by the wind blades that came flying in all directions. The moment the wind blades came into contact with the ashes, all of them disappeared without a trace. It was as if the wind blades had never existed in the previous 0.01 seconds, disappearing without a trace. How could this be? Rina Takasaka's expression grew more and more serious. The wind blades she had casually released were equivalent to a full-powered attack from the ghost-level Yuan Ku. Even a famed sword-level wielder would have to focus on defending against such an attack. How could it disappear just because of some ashes? It's a waste of the first petal. Chingpin shook her head. She felt that using a single leaf to deal with the wind blades was like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Rise times tornado. Rina Takasaka decided that she couldn't treat Chingpin casually anymore. This was an opponent that wasn't inferior to her, and she had to give it her all. With Rina Takasaka at the center, a tornado appeared out of thin air. In an instant, sand and pebbles were blown away, and everything in the surroundings was sucked into the tornado. However, this was only the beginning. The second, third, fourth, and fifth tornadoes rose from the ground and surrounded Rina Takasaka. This was Rina Takasaka's ultimate move. Each of the 24 tornadoes was no weaker than the dragon-level Yuan Ku. The 20 tornadoes were like 24 dragon-level Yuan Ku wielders, 24 grand swordsmen. It could be seen that Rina Takasaka had put in a lot of effort to deal with the 24 tornadoes. Her forehead was covered in sweat. Summoning these tornadoes required a lot of energy, and maintaining the 24 tornadoes at the same time took up a lot of Rina Takasaka's energy. The amount of energy she had expended determined that she had to attack quickly. Otherwise, she would tire herself out if this went on. Dazzling tornado formation. At Rina Takasaka's command, the small tornadoes were like chess pieces. They immediately spun toward their designated positions, sucking in all the rocks and trees along the way. By the time the 24 tornadoes reached their respective positions, they had grown from small tornadoes the size of trees to medium-sized tornadoes the size of buildings. At the same time, the 24 tornadoes surrounded Qingpin from all directions. It felt like 24 ferocious chariots and artillery soldiers had surrounded the lone general of the enemy in the middle of the camp. This was a dead end in the game of chess. The situation seemed to have turned dangerous in an instant. I can feel the presence of a powerful wind element. On the way to the Mailing mountain range, a slender immortal sword flew rapidly in the air. A man with fluttering clothes stood on the immortal sword. This man was sword immortal Wuzhang Shifang, who had just returned to Yuzhang City from the Mailing mountain range. The immortal sword he was standing on was the heavenly sword of the sword mistress. There were many ways for an immortal sword wielder to travel. They could take a hovercraft, or they could take a battleship. They could walk on their own, or they could fly in the sky. However, the most convenient and common way to travel was to stand on their sword mistress and let it fly at a speed that surpassed the speed of sound. It felt like flying swords in ancient Xianxia novels. Sword immortals could fly on their swords and travel thousands of miles in an instant. Of course, the actual flying speed could not be that exaggerated, but it was not a problem to surpass the speed of sound. It took them less than 10 minutes to reach the Mailing mountain range. It was several times faster than flying back to the Mailing mountain range. This was the fastest flying speed that Wuzhang Shifang could currently use. When Wuzhang Shifang was sprinting toward the Mailing mountain range, the heavenly sword of the sword mistress suddenly told Wuzhang through the sword mark that she felt the presence of a powerful wind element. The presence of the wind element. Wuzhang Shifang was stunned when he heard this. The wind element was the embodiment of the Western magic system's understanding of the world. They believed that everything in the universe could be divided into 12 elemental systems, and the wind element was one of these 12 elemental systems. In other words, the Yuan Ku that Tian Cumulus Cloud felt should be a Western magic Yuan Ku. There's no way I'm wrong. I once fought a wind elemental elf king in my past life. It was a tough battle. I can still remember it clearly. It's the power of the wind elemental, Tian Tsongyun said solemnly. Can you determine the level of that Yuan Ku? Wuzhang Shifang asked. It's too far away, so it's a little blurry, but I'm sure that it's at least a nether tier Yuan Ku. The heavenly sword of the sword mistress was very decisive. Wuzhang Shifang nodded to himself. According to his estimation, it should be a nether tier Yuan Ku. Sigh. I hope this Yuan Ku isn't coming for that unlucky sword wielder. Wuzhang Shifang smiled bitterly. He should have brought Guhan with him when he left. After all, he had not gotten the information about the prince tier from Guhan yet. If he had brought Guhan with him, everything would have been fine. However, there were two reasons why Wuzhang Shifang decided to let Guhan stay there. First, Wu Wudao was also there. At that time, Wuzhang Shifang and Wu Wudao did not have a secret conversation in the study. Their relationship was superficial. If Wuzhang Shifang showed that he cared too much about Guhan, it would inevitably arouse the old fox's suspicion. Wu Wudao's need for the prince tier was no less than Hao Tianzhendi's. The second reason was a little hard to say. It was because Tian Tsongyun cared too much about the solid Han. He was angry, sad, and tried his best to save her. This made Wuzhang Shifang not hide anything from Guhan. A feeling of jealousy filled Wuzhang Shifang's heart. Don't think that sword immortals were immortals. They were just humans with great power. The emotions and desires in their hearts were even more than those of ordinary people. Bringing Jiyu Han with him and watching Tian Junyun take care of him, would they forget their original master? Wuzhang Shifang was not so open-minded. Therefore, Wuzhang Shifang decided to leave Guhan there first. Anyway, the swordsman from Yuzhang City would arrive soon. After he finished his discussion with Wu Wudao, he could look for Guhan to get the prince tier. Would he dare to defy the will of an immortal sword-bearer? However, when he left Guhan, something happened. When the swordsman from Yuzhang City arrived, Guhan's medical pod had disappeared without a trace. It would have been fine if he had known about it immediately. However, Wu Wudao, the old fox, had kept it a secret because he did not want to cause unnecessary trouble. By the time Wuzhang Shifang got the news and returned to Mailing mountain range, it was already 2 hours later. Who knew if Guhan was dead or alive? According to Wuzhang Shifang's judgment, There were only two forces interested in taking Guhan away. One was the swordsman from Longsha Gendi's side. The Prince Tyr was irresistible to any Gendi. It was not surprising that Longsha Gendi's people appeared here. The second was that Yuan Ku happened to appear there and took away Guhan's medical pod. Wuzhang Shifang could only hope that it was Longsha Gendi's people who took away Guhan, not Yuan Ku. If it was Longsha Gendi, Guhan would certainly not die, and the whereabouts of the Prince Tyr would be expected to be found. But if it was Yuan Ku who took away Guhan, then Wuzhang Shifang could only hope to find Guhan's dimensional pocket to see if the Prince Tyr was hidden in it. As for Guhan's life, he did not hold any hope. However, from the aura of the underworld-level wind elemental Yuan Qi that had suddenly appeared, Ji Yuhan was most likely done for. Thinking of this, Wuzhang Shifang suddenly felt a headache. Returning to the battlefield, when the 24 tornadoes were in place, the siege against the young girl Qingpin officially began. On the left and right sides of the young girl Qingpin, the 4 tornadoes wrapped in a huge amount of sand and stones rushed over. If she was directly hit by such a tornado, the young girl Qingpin would be turned into meat paste on the spot by the flying sand and stones. Intercept. With another intercept word, 2 petals of the white lotus in the air fell, and like the previous one, after burning to ashes, the tornado that was about to sweep the young girl Qingpin instantly subsided and disappeared. What was more frightening was that the sand and stones wrapped in the tornado also disappeared along with the tornado. If the disappearance of the invisible airflow like the wind was understandable, then the disappearance of the solid things like sand and stones was something that Takasaka Rina could not understand. Suddenly, Takasaka Rina began to feel afraid. Chapter 271. Are you afraid? Qingpin asked calmly when she saw the change in Rina Takasaka's expression. Rina Takasaka was indeed afraid. Due to the disappearance of the previous wind blade, she was already prepared for it. She focused all her attention on controlling the 24 tornadoes, especially the one that attacked Qingpin earlier. Rina Takasaka focused more than 60% of her attention on it. She was afraid that Qingpin would use some strange method to make her tornadoes disappear, just like the wind blade earlier. However, the thing that he was worried about happened again. The 4 tornadoes disappeared without any warning. Even the mental power that Rina Takasaka had attached to the tornado to control the wind element in the tornado had disappeared. It felt as if her arm had been crushed on a molecular level. It was one thing for her arm to be crushed, but what was more frightening was that Rina Takasaka had no idea how or what destroyed her arm. That was the scariest thing. Forget it. Let's attack together. Rina Takasaka's face was ashen. Under her command, the remaining 20 tornadoes swept toward Qingpin at the same time. 20 tornadoes attacking at the same time. Putting aside the attack power, just the might of the attack alone was enough to scare a bunch of people to death. In the face of such an attack, Qingpin's expression did not change at all. Trash is trash. No matter how many there are, it's still trash. The poor girl mocked without any trace of politeness. She slightly spat out her red lips, and another 3 petals fell from the white lotus and were burned into ashes. The remaining 20 tornadoes disappeared without a trace, just like the previous 4 tornadoes. Phut! Rina Takasaka spat out a mouthful of blood. It was worth noting that Rina Takasaka's blood was not red. Instead, it was transparent with a hint of green. The color of her blood proved once again that Rina Takasaka was not human, but a genuine Yuan Ku. Losing the 24 tornadoes and the mental power that was attached to them was no different from being hit by a car. This greatly injured Takasaka Rina's body, but at the same time, it also allowed Takasaka Rina to figure out how to make her tornado disappear. It's those petals. It's those petals, right? Rina Takasaka stared at Qingpin and questioned. Your petals can cut off my control over the wind element. That must be it. Based on what happened earlier, Rina Takasaka guessed that the white lotus formed by the 20 leaves was the reason why her skill disappeared. The first time, it was 1, the second, 2, and the third time, it was 3. Every time the petals were incinerated, her skill would disappear, and she would lose contact with it. There was no need to deduce the cause and effect relationship in this matter. The root of all the problems was on this white lotus. There was no mistake about it. Faced with Rina Takasaka's question, Qingpin did not say a word. Her expression was cold as usual, as if she did not hear what Rina Takasaka said. Qingpin, what do you think of this move of mine? Rina Takasaka panted. Her body trembled, and another 24 tornadoes rose from the ground. But this time, Rina Takasaka did not choose to surround Qingpin with the tornadoes like before. Instead, she fused all the tornadoes together. The 24 tornadoes began to approach the other tornadoes. Suddenly, one of the tornadoes tore open its eye and swallowed the other tornadoes into its body, forming an even larger tornado. Following that, the larger tornado opened its mouth again and again. Within 10 seconds, it had swallowed all the other tornadoes into its body, and the 24 tornadoes fused together to form a powerful tornado. Although the 24 tornadoes had fused together, the size of the tornado did not change at all. It still looked like a tornado. Think about it. If 24 tornadoes fused together without any change in size, then its power and density must have undergone a great change. Compared to the previous 24 tornadoes, this tornado, be it in terms of speed or density, is dozens or even hundreds of times more powerful than the previous tornadoes. As this tornado spun, the space around it was torn apart. We can see spatial cracks being torn in space. To be able to tear apart space with pure speed is a terrifying power. Just this tornado alone shows that Rina Takasaka's strength has surpassed the nether rank Yuan Ku, reaching the standard of the meteor rank Yuan Ku. To be able to tear apart space with pure speed. This is one of the criteria that separates the nether rank from the meteor rank. Qingpin, can you withstand my tornado of annihilation? Rina Takasaka laughed bitterly and spat out more than 10 mouthfuls of blood. This tornado of annihilation was already at the level of a forbidden spell. With her current strength, she was still unable to control such a powerful technique. She had to expend her life force to use it. However, Rina Takasaka's technique was valuable. At the very least, when the young girl Qingpin saw the tornado of annihilation flying towards her, she frowned for the first time. But it was only a slight frown. Intercept. It was another intercept, but this time, a total of 10 petals fell from the white lotus and were burned to ashes. On the other hand, the astonishing tornado also turned into nothingness, just like before. Haha. I get it now. Seeing that her ultimate move, which she had worked so hard to prepare, was rendered useless once more, not only did Rina Takasaka not feel dejected, she even smiled. Destroying my skill requires the number of petals of your white lotus flower. The stronger my skill is, the more petals it will consume. Am I right, Paw? Yes. She originally thought that she wouldn't receive a response from Seiji just like before, but she didn't expect that Reina Takasaka would actually reply with a yes. This suddenly made Reina Takasaka feel like thanking God for his grace. But what can you do? Qingpin retorted, her tone filled with disdain. What can I do? Come, Qingpin, take a look at this. Rina Takasaka stretched out her hand and opened her palm. A tiny black ball the size of a longan floated above her palm. Moreover, the volume of this small ball was still slowly changing, gradually becoming larger. Qingpin, do you know what the limit of air and wind control is? Rina Takasaka laughed bitterly and spat out more mouthfuls of blood. I don't know. And there's no need for me to know. Qingpin replied coldly. Haha, then let me tell you. The limit of wind control is the absence of wind. Rina Takasaka clenched her teeth. The black ball floating above her palm had already grown to the size of a ping-pong ball. Wind is the flow of air. As long as there is air, there will be wind. In a calm space, as long as there is air, there will be the flow of wind. To surpass the limit of wind is to make the wind disappear. In order to make the wind disappear, you must make the air disappear as well. This is the so-called vacuum. Reina Takasaka was kind enough to explain the effects of her skills to him. Finish. Rina Takasaka tossed the black ball in her hand to Poverty Ken's side. Then, the black ball exploded, or rather, it sucked in all the air in the surroundings. With Rina Takasaka at the center, the black ball sucked in the air at a speed that surpassed its limits. The speed was so fast that the surrounding air could not catch up to the speed of the black ball's absorption. As a result, a vacuum was formed in a small space in an instant. This small space rapidly expanded, and soon, Qingpin was also enveloped in it. Nonsense. Vacuum has no effect on the Sword Maiden, Qingpin said coldly as she looked at the expanding vacuum that was about to envelop her. She had no intention of using the petals of the white lotus to get rid of the vacuum. Just as Qingpin had said, vacuum was meaningless to the Sword Maiden. The space within the scabbard and the dimensional space was a vacuum without any air. As a Sword Maiden who did not need to breathe, vacuum had almost no effect on her. Haha, of course it doesn't matter to you, Qingpin. But don't forget that you still have your beloved Guhan behind you. Hearing Rina Takasaka's proud words, Qingpin's expression finally changed. With a flick of her hand, the remaining petals of the white lotus in the sky fell to the ground in an attempt to get rid of the vacuum. However, only 4 of the 20 petals of the white lotus were left. The remaining 4 petals could only stop the vacuum from expanding for 4 seconds. 4 seconds later, the vacuum had completely swallowed Qingpin and Guhan. Seeing that the vacuum had completely swallowed Guhan and Qingpin, Rina Takasaka could no longer suppress the boiling blood in her body. Like a fountain, Rina Takasaka spat out half of her body's volume of blood. I used up more than half of the wind elemental energy in my body to cast this skill. It's more than 10 times more exhausting than the apocalyptic tornado. Qingpin, you only have 4 petals left. How can you possibly get rid of my vacuum? Rina Takasaka, who was extremely weak, collapsed to the ground and muttered to herself, it's true that the vacuum can't kill the poor, but it's enough to kill Ji Han. In 10 seconds, Ji Han, who's already injured, will have his blood sucked dry by the vacuum and die. As long as Guhan is dead, the masterless Qingpin will turn back into a sword. Qingpin, just what kind of sword maiden are you? If not for Guhan, I'm afraid I'll be the one dying today. To be on the safe side, Rina Takasaka maintained the vacuum sphere for a full 2 minutes before it finally dissipated. Chapter 272. After spitting out a dozen mouthfuls of blood, Rina Takasaka was 90% certain that she could see Guhan being killed by the vacuum and Qingpin transforming back into her sword form due to Guhan's death. That way, she would be able to return to the Luinian family residence to complete her quest. When the vacuum gradually dissipated, Rina Takasaka only saw a figure lying on the ground. Apart from that, there was no one else standing. Rina Takasaka breathed a sigh of relief. The figure on the ground was undoubtedly Guhan, and Qingpin should have transformed back into her sword form. Unfortunately, Rina Takasaka was completely disappointed. The figure on the ground slowly floated up, and her long black hair fluttered in the wind. This hair was not something that Guhan should have. The figure that floated up could only be the young girl, Qingpin. The light in Rina Takasaka's eyes dimmed. Since Haru was still in the form of a swordess, it meant that the solid Han was still alive. Her final move had failed. Qingpin, who was floating in the air, straightened her body. There was another person lying on the ground behind her. It seemed that Qingpin had been lying on top of Guhan's body earlier. The two of them overlapped, giving Rina Takasaka the illusion that there was only one figure. Rina Takasaka finally understood why Guhan was still alive. When the vacuum enveloped them, Qingpin had been lying on top of Guhan's body and sealed her mouth over Guhan's. That was how Guhan was able to maintain the balance of air in his body. Only by doing so could he maintain the air that Guhan needed to survive. Don't you find this move familiar? Yes, back in the dungeon, Artoria had used this move as well. Back then, they were in the middle of a nuclear bomb. This time, they were in a vacuum. However, compared to the nuclear bomb, the vacuum was much worse. If she had only sealed his mouth, she would not have been able to save Guhan's life. Clearly, when Qingpin sealed Guhan's body, Qingpin had done something else. Otherwise, Guhan would have died. You actually made me kiss a human? When Qingpin stood up again, her face was filled with disgust. Yes, disgust. It seemed that she was disgusted by the fact that she had kissed Guhan. It seemed that Qingpin and Qingpin were two separate personalities. Cute Qingpin was a child who slept in Guhan's arms every day. It was impossible for her to hate Guhan. Based on this, you don't have the right to live. Qingpin's voice was so cold that it seemed to be able to freeze the air. Do you think you've got me? I can still fight you. Rina Takasaka used her air sword to prop herself up and raised her long sword. She was prepared to end the battle in a melee. Since she was no match for Qingpin's air sword, she might have a chance of surviving in a melee. Although she had mainly received elemental skills training in the Fleeting Time family, she had also learned some of the Fleeting Time family's unique swordsmanship. Young Qingpin was a weak girl. Perhaps a melee attack was the right choice. HMPH, stubborn. Young Qingpin looked at Rina Takasaka, who was charging at her with her air sword. Young Qingpin had a look of disdain on her face. With a thought, a white lotus floated in front of Qingpin. Unlike the previous white lotus flower, this white lotus flower was not temporarily pieced together from tree leaves. Instead, it flew out from the poor girl's body. At the same time, this white lotus only had 6 petals. Unlike the previous one, which had a total of 20 petals. After releasing the white lotus, Qingpin's face instantly turned yellow. Beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. It was completely different from how she looked when she was fighting earlier. It seemed like this white lotus that was born from her body had drained a lot of her energy. It's still too weak. Not even 1,000th of it. Young Qingpin mumbled. Forget it. Using the holy green lotus to deal with this woman is already making a mountain out of a molehill. If Song Hammer was here and heard young Qingpin's words, he would definitely complain about the holy green lotus. Judging from the color, it was clearly a holy white lotus that flew out. Sever Time's technique was different from the simple sever from before. This time, the poor girl actually spat out 2 words. From this point of view, the white lotus attack this time was definitely more heaven-defying than the previous one. As expected, as soon as Qingpin gave the order, one of the petals on the white lotus fell. However, it did not burn to ashes. Instead, it slowly flew toward Rina Takasaka like an autumn leaf dancing in the sky. There's no need to dodge. When she touches me, my sword will already be at Qingpin's throat. Seeing the petals dancing, Rina Takasaka was a little cautious. However, when she realized that the petals were too slow, Rina Takasaka let her guard down. She tried her best to close the distance between her and Qingpin so that she could engage in close combat with him. However, the petals that seemed to be drifting slowly in Rina Takasaka's eyes magically appeared in front of her. Rina Takasaka did not even see the trajectory of the petals clearly before it appeared in front of her and stuck itself between her brows. Like a facial cleanser, it melted into Rina Takasaka's body. Reina Takorban felt an indescribable will enter her body through the space between her brows. Then, it mysteriously slashed a sword through her body, severing a certain heartstring in her mind. Rina Takasaka instantly stopped moving. She stood on the ground in a daze. She stretched her hand out in front of her. Her hand was fine, but the air sword in her hand was nowhere to be seen. There's nothing strange about it. This is the same method that nullified my skill. I'll just create another air sword. Rina Takasaka thought of using the wind element to compress another air sword. However, no matter how hard she tried, the new air sword did not appear. Not only was there no new air sword, the air around Rina Takasaka did not even budge. It was as if Rina Takasaka had not used her skill at all. Wind, come. Wind, come. Wind, come. The panicked Rina Takasaka kept trying to control the wind element, but the wind element in the air ignored her commands. It was as if Rina Takasaka was a Chunibya girl. She could not control the wind element. This was unimaginable to Rina Takasaka. Controlling the wind element was her innate ability. Being unable to control the wind element was like a normal person being unable to eat or a person who had been writing all their lives being unable to write a single word. It's that petal? Did the petal cut off my ability to control the wind element? A terrifying thought appeared in Rina Takasaka's mind. Compared to Annihilation's own skill, it was on a completely different level. No, I can't fight anymore. I have to go. For the first time, the The thought of running away rose in Rina Takasaka's mind. Then, she decisively started running, just like how Guhan had decided to run away earlier. Not to mention, Rina Takasaka's speed of escape was quite fast. She ran like a small train. If she had not lost her ability to control the wind, she would have been able to ride on the wind, and her speed would be similar to a small plane. Intercept vision. Qingpin snorted coldly. Another white lotus petal fell and instantly appeared in between Rina Takasaka's brows, fusing into her body. Then, Rina Takasaka, who was running at high speed, suddenly staggered and fell to the ground. Rina Takasaka, who was running, suddenly felt the same mysterious sword that she had felt before she lost her ability. Rina Takasaka's vision went black. Rina Takasaka lost her balance and fell. Why? Why can't I see clearly? What's wrong with my eyes? Rina Takasaka was shocked. Her eyes did not suffer any damage, but she had suddenly lost her sight, just like how she had lost her ability to control the wind element. Could it be that not only can Qingpin cut off my control over the wind, but she can also cut off my sight? Rina Takasaka had a terrifying guess. Intercept vision. Another white lotus petal fell and fused into Rina Takasaka's body. This time, Rina Takasaka realized that she had lost her sense of hearing. She could no longer hear anything from the outside. Intercept vision. Qingpin continued to strip Rina Takasaka of her various abilities. This time, it was Rina Takasaka's turn to lose her sense of touch. The feeling of soil that came through her skin had also disappeared from her mind. The fifth petal of intercept vision. Rina Takasaka lost control of her limbs again. None of her body parts could respond to the commands from Rina Takasaka's brain. At this time, Rina Takasaka had lost her 5 basic abilities. She had become a prisoner trapped in her own body, and what was being held captive was Rina Takasaka's soul. Intercept vision. Rina Takasaka had lost all ability to resist like a dead fish. Young Qingpin had no intention of letting her go. She spat out the 2 words intercept vision. As the name suggested, this time, young Qingpin was going to intercept Rina Takasaka's soul. Once her soul disappeared, Rina Takasaka would die. Even the Eon-level Yuan Ku would not be able to save her. As Qingpin spat out the 2 words, the last petal of the white lotus fell and appeared between Rina Takasaka's brows, ready to take her life. Save me. Father. Rina Takasaka, who was trapped in the depths of her consciousness, knew that it was time to decide her life. However, she did not want to die. She screamed from the depths of her soul. Sigh, wrong, wrong. It's ultimately wrong. Takasaka Rina's soul heard the sigh. Then, a huge hand appeared out of thin air and covered Takasaka Rina's body. The petal that had fallen to the ground touched the huge hand. The moment it touched the hand, the petal was burned into a thick black smoke. A fingernail-sized dent was left on the hand, as if it had lost a piece of flesh. Forgive us, lady. We were wrong. A low voice came from the sky. Then, the large hand grabbed Rina Takasaka's body and returned to the void, disappearing without a trace. Meddlesome. The young girl cursed as she looked at the disappearing hand. The battle ended just like that. Chapter 273. When did you wake up? Qingpin turned around and saw Guhan standing behind her. Unbeknownst to her, the unconscious Guhan had already woken up. It should be when Qingpin got rid of Rina Takasaka's ability. Guhan forced a smile and explained, as soon as her ability disappeared, the wind needles on my acupoints disappeared as well, and I woke up. It's better for you to stay unconscious. Qingpin sneered at Guhan, which made Guhan's heart ache. His Qingpin, the cute Qingpin, actually sneered at him, looking at him with a cold and disdainful smile. Before Qingpin, Guhan felt like a lowly dog. Qingpin, the battle is over. Let's go home. Guhan suddenly felt tired. Even when he was on the verge of death, he didn't feel this tired. He did not ask why the poor man had suddenly turned into a young girl, nor did he ask why the poor man was so cold to him. He knew that asking would not yield any results. He just wanted to end things quickly and return home, so that he could use time to solve these problems. Guhan walked forward, wanting to hold Qingpin's hand and bring Qingpin home. However, before Guhan could take a few steps, he was stopped by Qingpin. Human, keep your distance. I'm noble, and you are lowly. Do you understand? Stop it, or I, Guhan, will get angry. Guhan's face suddenly turned cold. Qingpin's words were too hurtful. Qingpin, I don't know how noble you are right now, but you are my sword mistress. I have the right to touch you, care for you, and love you. Nonsense. Qingpin looked at Guhan with killing intent. No one has the right to do such a thing to Qingpin. Really? Ji Yuhan suddenly laughed, his face full of love. Poor, you forgot, you like Ji Yuhan the most, you like to hug Ji Yuhan the most to sleep, you like to put your feet into Ji Yuhan's mouth the most, you like to eat meat the most, you like to wipe your greasy hands on Ji Yuhan's face the most, you like to sleep, you like to lie in the baby pouch on Ji Yuhan's chest the most, you like to listen to Ji Yuhan tell you the love story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs the most, you like to sleep the most, you like to lie in the baby pouch on Ji Yuhan's chest the most, you like to listen to Ji Yuhan tell you the love story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. These are all evidence of your favorite Guhan. How could you even forget these? Logically speaking, Guhan's lines made the author feel a little disgusted. You. Every word that Guhan said was incomparably disgusting to Qingpin's ears. Qingpin's face was covered in a layer of frost. By the time Guhan finished speaking, Qingpin's face could already be used as a refrigerator. I'm starting to regret saving you. Qingpin gritted her teeth. I'm going to deprive you of your 5 senses. To me, it's enough that you're still alive. As Qingpin spoke, another 6-petal white lotus flew out of her body. This white lotus kept spinning, and as long as a petal fell, Guhan would lose one of his senses, just like Rina Kosaka. In the end, he would become a prisoner of his body, no different from the human swine from thousands of years ago. Qingpin, I know that what I said just now will make you angry to the point that you want to kill me. But do you know why I still said it? Looking at the spinning white lotus, Guhan was neither afraid nor angry. Instead, his face was calm and composed. Why? Qingpin truly had no idea why Guhan would deliberately provoke her in her current state. Because I want to know if you're still my sword maiden. Guhan smiled brightly. Qingpin, come into my embrace. How could I? When Qingpin heard Guhan's order, her face was filled with disdain. It was as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. But very soon, something even more ridiculous happened. Qingpin's body actually walked to Guhan's side and allowed Guhan to embrace her. Why? Why is this happening? The poor girl was dumbfounded. Her own body actually didn't listen to her own control and automatically walked into the embrace of the solid cold. Was this body still her own? Qingpin, withdraw your skill. I'm scared just looking at it. Guhan didn't answer Qingpin's question. Instead, he ordered Qingpin to withdraw the spinning white lotus back into her body. Sure enough, although Qingpin was unwilling and uncooperative, the white lotus quickly returned to Qingpin's body. I said, you're my sword maiden. You'll be my sword maiden for life. Guhan tightly embraced Qingpin in his embrace. Qingpin, who had turned into a young girl, was no longer the cute girl that Guhan could tightly wrap around with one hand. She was a girl that Guhan could only hug with 2 hands. Her body completely filled Guhan's embrace. Her figure was exquisite, and her body exuded a lemon-like fragrance. No matter how one looked at it, no matter how one felt, Qingpin was already a young girl. Qingpin, your sword scar is still floating in my zifu. I can still sense your soul through the sword scar. I can feel the bond between us. We are one. I am your sword wielder, and you are my sword maiden. The sword maiden listens to the sword wielder's command. This is a fact that has never changed since ancient times. Even if you are a spirit sword, an immortal sword, or an emperor sword, even if you surpass an emperor sword and reach an unprecedented level, you still have to abide by this bond because our souls have already fused together. Guhan murmured. I'm starting to regret saving you. Qingpin finally understood why her body didn't listen to her control, but instead listened to Guhan's command. It was because of the sword scar. If I had known earlier, I would have let that woman destroy your sword scar. That would have been the best choice, Qingpin said indignantly. The facial features on her face were squeezed together mischievously. She once again had the cute style of Qingpin. I know. Guhan forcefully touched Qingpin's head. Guhan, the reason why I can live today is all because of Qingpin's great mercy. Guhan thanks you. Guhan sincerely thanks my family's Qingpin. If it wasn't for Qingpin today, Guhan would have really died. I'm going to kill you. You actually dared to touch my head. Qingpin, who was in Guhan's embrace, continued to angrily curse. All right, if killing me will make you happy. Guhan let go of his hand and took a step back. He stood opposite Qingpin. I won't order you through the sword scar now. Qingpin, you can now control your own actions. I'm at your disposal. After saying that, Guhan closed her eyes. It seemed that she was really willing to let Qingpin punish her. Kill her or dismember her, as Qingpin wished. This is a trick to trick little girls. Qingpin sneered. The white lotus floated out of her body again. Sever times desire. Qingpin spat out these two words. A petal slowly fell from the white lotus. Then, it stuck to Guhan's eyebrows and merged into it. Pu. Guhan felt something sink in his arms. He opened his eyes and saw the young girl, Qingpin, falling into his arms. Of course, she did not fall into Guhan's arms of her own accord. Instead, she fell into Guhan's arms like a domino. At this time, Qingpin's eyes were already closed. This child was too tired and had fallen asleep. This battlefield. Wuzhang Shifang, who was standing on the heavenly sword of gathering clouds, jumped down from the flying sword and arrived at the battlefield where Qingpin and Rina Takasaka had fought. Looking at the battlefield that had been razed to the ground, Wuzhang Shifang was shocked. This is the power of the meteor realm Yuan Ku. A very pure wind element, just like the wind elemental king in my previous life. The heavenly sword of gathering clouds automatically transformed into a sword mistress. She had fought for more than 900 years with Yuan Ku. She knew more about him than Wuzhang Shifang. Just by looking at the remaining wind elements in the air, she could tell that Yuan Ku was a pure wind elemental Yuan Ku. According to the location of the personal terminal, the swordbearer is still here. When Wuzhang Shifang went out, he specifically asked Wu Dao for a special permission, which was the permission to locate Ji Yuhan's personal terminal. However, Guhan's personal terminal seemed to be in a blocked state. Yuzhang City's monitoring center could not locate Guhan at all. But 3 minutes ago, something changed. The control center once again successfully locked onto Guhan's location. This location was where Wuzhang Shifang was at this time. He's over there. Tenzumu Kumo pointed to a place blocked by the ruins and immediately flashed over. Wuzhang Shifang shook his head, followed behind Tenzumu Kumo, and appeared there. Sure enough, Guhan, who was covered in injuries and had 4 broken fingers, was lying in the ruins in a coma. Give this to him. Wuzhang Shifang took out a capsule from his dimensional pocket and asked Tenzumu Kumo to stuff it into Guhan's mouth. This was a capsule that could help people regain consciousness. Of course, it also had a certain healing effect. Senior Wuzhang, did you save me? Wuzhang Shifang's medicine was very effective. In a few seconds, Guhan woke up, and then his eyes were full of surprise and gratitude. Obviously, Guhan thought that Wuzhang Shifang saved him. I didn't save you. Wuzhang Shifang was disdainful of such a misunderstanding and chose to deny it immediately. However, before he could finish speaking, Guhan rolled over and knelt in front of Wuzhang Shifang. He raised his hands and presented a dazzling dimensional crystal to Wuzhang Shifang with both hands. This was the prince seed that Wuzhang Shifang had specially come to find. Guhan is unable to repay Senior Wuzhang's great kindness. Guhan can only offer this prince seed to Sword Immortal Wuzhang. I hope that Sword Immortal will not reject Guhan's sincerity. Guhan's words sounded sincere. However, Wuzhang Shifang was not very interested in whether Guhan was sincere or not. He cared more about this prince seed. Since the other party had already offered it with both hands, it would be impolite for Wuzhang Shifang to refuse. This prince seed is in my hands. Wuzhang Shifang directly placed the prince seed into his dimensional pocket. Then, he touched his personal terminal on Jiyu Han's personal terminal and transferred 500 million renminbi into it. Here's the money. Keep it well. Before Wuzhang Shifang could finish speaking, Gu Han immediately transferred the 500 million yuan back to Wuzhang Shifang. What's the meaning of this? Do you think I, Wuzhang Shifang, will care about a mere 500 million yuan? Wuzhang Shifang's face turned cold. Gu Han's return made him feel insulted. Senior Wuzhang, Gu Han would never dare to insult you. Gu Han only has one request. I hope that Sword Immortal Wuzhang will accept Gu Han as a disciple and let Gu Han listen to the Sword Immortal's teachings at all times. I beg you, Senior Wuzhang. Chapter 274. The master-disciple relationship was not a common one in this world. After becoming a swordsman, the swordsman did not need to learn any advanced moves or techniques. Most of the moves were already known by the sword mistress. The swordsman only needed to hide behind the sword mistress and learn how to protect himself. For a swordsman, the most important thing was combat experience. Learning how to use the sword mistress flexibly in battle and how to protect oneself was the key. Originally, these things needed to be taught by the senior swordsman. However, ever since the advent of the game, every swordsman could fully hone their combat experience in actual combat, which was several times more useful than a teacher's teachings. For example, when Gu Han became Wuzhang Shifang's disciple, Wuzhang Shifang could only teach Gu Han some combat experience. As for swordsmanship, Wuzhang Shifang might not even be as good as Gu Han, who had mastered the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. The only person who could really teach Gu Han swordsmanship was the sword master, and Wuzhang Shifang was not a sword master. There were only 2 sword masters among all the immortal sword wielders. In ancient times, the master-disciple relationship was prevalent because the skills of the master could be passed on to the disciple. The skills of the master could also be passed on to the disciple. In order to pass on their skills, the master was willing to accept a disciple, and the disciple was also willing to find a powerful master. However, the strength of the swordsman mainly depended on the sword mistress herself, and the sword mistress could only be passed on through the bloodline. There was no situation where the master taught a disciple, and the disciple could inherit the sword mistress from the master. From the perspective of the disciple, he could not get much from the master, but he might be restricted by the master. For the master, he could not teach the disciple anything useful, and the disciple could not pass on anything from the master. Therefore, the master-disciple relationship was not common in this world, because the benefits of the master-disciple relationship were not much. However, when the master became an immortal sword wielder, it was very different, because the master of the immortal sword wielder had a special ability. The wielder of the immortal sword tier could tear through the void from thousands of kilometers away and exert their power to pull someone back to their side, just like the pair of giant hands that had pulled Rina Takasaka away earlier. This was the fundamental reason why Gu Han suddenly wanted to become Wuzhang Shifang's disciple. Originally, Gu Han was an extremely arrogant person and did not think that he needed to have anyone as his master, so he had never thought about this. According to Gu Han's plan, he wanted to use his own strength to kill his way to immortal sword wielder, then ascend the throne and become an emperor sword wielder. However, after this experience, especially the helplessness he felt when facing Medusa and Reina Takasaka, Jiyu Han suddenly understood. To hell with pride and dignity. Nothing was more important than his own life. He did not activate the protagonist aura. If not for Qing Pin's sudden release, he would have been crippled by Rina. If not for Qing Pin, he, Takasaka, and all, he, the same thing, would be. Especially since Rina Takasaka had coveted Qing Pin. Now that Rina Takasaka had failed, there would definitely be other people like Kyosuke Takasaka, Tongo Takasaka, Chiyanori Takasaka, and Anako Takasaka who would come to snatch Qing Pin from him. Initially, Gu Han did not understand why the mastermind would want to snatch Qing Pin. When he saw the young girl Qing Pin's strength, Gu Han understood that Qing Pin was definitely not as simple as an ancient sword wielder. There must be a huge secret behind her, and this secret would attract the mastermind to continuously send assassins. After Reina Takasaka's failure, The mastermind probably wouldn't be so kind as to use green silk to cut off his sword mark. It would be more straightforward to just kill him. But why did the mastermind use green silk to cut off his sword mark in the first place? Wouldn't the cost be too high? Green silk was not any less precious than a prince-type treasure. Regarding this point, Ji Han still could not understand. Well, it seemed that he had gone off topic. Back to Gu Han's apprenticeship. The reason why Gu Han wanted to be apprenticed to Wuzhang Shifang was to prepare in advance for the possible attack of the mastermind. If he was no match for the enemy, he could immediately call for his master, Wuzhang Shifang, to extend a huge hand and save him from danger. From this, it could be seen that life and death experiences could indeed make a person change greatly. If it was the Gu Han of the past, he would probably not want to be apprenticed to someone even if he was beaten to death. Hearing Gu Han's request, Wuzhang Shifang was stunned at first, but then he smiled playfully. Of course, he did not think that Gu Han truly admired him and wanted to be apprenticed to him. He could see through the fundamental purpose of Gu Han's apprenticeship at a glance. It was to obtain his protection. Wuzhang Shifang did not directly answer Gu Han's request, but asked Gu Han in return, "Immortal sword-bearers rarely accept disciples. Do you know why?" "I don't know." Gu Han shook his head. In fact, he knew, he was just pretending not to know. If he wanted to be apprenticed to a master, he should not pretend to know everything in front of his master. This was a saying from experience. "You little guys, all you see is us immortal sword-bearers using the giant world-breaking hand to save our disciples from thousands of miles away, but you don't know the price of using the giant world-breaking hand." Wuzhang Shifang extended his right palm. "This hand of mine is going to suffer a huge dimensional backlash. I'm afraid I won't be able to use this hand for at least 20 days. That's why immortal sword-bearers rarely accept disciples, especially ancient sword-bearers like you. It's common for you to encounter life-threatening situations 4 or 5 times a day. I don't have that much energy to spend on you." Wuzhang Shifang shook his head. "I'm not interested in taking disciples. Disciples are just a burden. Forget 500 million renminbi, even 50 billion won't make me nod. Take this money. Increasing your strength is the way to go. Don't even think about using me. F***ck, let's go." After saying this, Wuzhang Shifang was about to leave with Tian Songyun. He had already obtained the Grand Prince seed, so there was no need for him to waste any more time with Gu Han. "Shifang, I think you should take him as a disciple. This young man is quite sincere." Tian Songyun did not immediately leave with Wuzhang Shifang. Instead, he smiled and tried to persuade Wuzhang Shifang. Tian Songyun's thinking was very simple. The bloodline of the Jiyu family could not be severed. Whether Gu Han was good or bad, he was the descendant of Jiyu Xuanwu. F***ck, if you like him, you can take him as a disciple. "Shifang, I'm not interested." Wuzhang Shifang was a little annoyed. From his point of view, Gu Han was an idiot talking nonsense. A timid and cunning young man was not worthy of being his disciple. Moreover, his heavenly cumulus sword seemed to have an inexplicable relationship with this young man. This made Wuzhang Shifang feel very vexed. "Senior Shifang, what if there is a prefecture king seed? I wonder if you can accept this lowly one as a disciple." Of course, Gu Han knew that 500 million renminbi was not enough to make a sword immortal agree to accept him as a disciple. Therefore, the condition he was prepared to exchange with Wuzhang Shifang was not the 500 million renminbi, but the prefecture king seed that Gu Han obtained. Prefecture king seed. Hearing the words prefecture king seed, even Wuzhang Shifang could not help but stop in his tracks. He began to seriously consider Gu Han's suggestion. The Grand Prince seed was a treasure that could increase Gendi's endurance in battle. It was something that Gendi wanted at all costs. At a lower level, the Prefecture King seed was a treasure that sword immortals wanted to obtain at all costs. Compared to the Grand Prince seed, which was produced every few decades, the Prefecture King seed would be dug out every few years. However, the total number was not enough for the sword immortals to distribute. Take Wuzhang Shifang as an example. He had only obtained one Duke seed in his life, and it was because of that Duke seed that he managed to kill his way into the Fusang Divine Branch's base camp on Fusang Island. He forced the Fusang Divine Branch's universe-level and universe-level Great Yuans to negotiate with him, and they allowed him to take away the Fusang Divine Branch's Sword Mother's main body. However, that Prefecture King seed had already used up the sword essence in the crystal during that battle, and it had become a piece of useless rock. From then on, Wuzhang Shifang never obtained a single Duke seed again. Currently, there were no dukedom seeds for sale in the market. Even if there were, it was not something that could be bought with money. Instead, one would have to pay a huge price for it. Compared to this price, taking in a disciple was nothing. Wuzhang Shifang had never expected that this little sword wielder would not only have a Grand Prince seed, but also a Prefecture King seed. This Prefecture King seed had successfully scratched Wuzhang Shifang's itch. He had a big plan, and if he wanted to realize this plan, he needed everything that could increase his fighting power. Take out your Prefecture King seed. Wuzhang Shifang turned around and ordered Guhan. Guhan did not hesitate, and he straightforwardly took out a Prefecture King seed from his dimensional pocket and placed it on his palm. At this moment, if Wuzhang Shifang wanted to snatch it, Guhan's Prefecture King seed would be snatched away by him in less than a second. Of course, Wuzhang Shifang could not bring himself to do such a thing, especially when his sword lady was watching. If you take this Prefecture King seed, I can give you a chance, Wuzhang Shifang said coldly. Wuzhang Shifang said coldly, I, Wuzhang Shifang, either don't accept disciples, or I accept the strongest one. You're a student of Yuzhang University, right? I don't care if you have the qualifications to participate in the 8th Academy tournament. In short, if you can get first place in the 8th Academy tournament in 3 months, I will accept you as my disciple. If you can't get it, then I won't return this Prefecture King seed to you. Whether you want this chance or not, it's up to you. After saying that, Wuzhang Shifang shut his mouth and coldly waited for Guhan's final decision. To be honest, Wuzhang Shifang's condition was very harsh. The first place in the 8th Academy tournament would have to compete with tens of thousands of sword wielder of the same generation. In terms of probability, there was only a 0.1% chance of winning. For this 0.1% chance, Guhan had to offer a Prefecture King seed. No matter how one looked at it, it was not worth it. Okay. Guhan did not hesitate and sent the Prefecture King seed to Wuzhang Shifang with both hands, indicating that he accepted this opportunity. This was because in Guhan's eyes, the success rate was not 0.1%, but 100%. However, Senior Shifang, I have a condition that you would like to amend, Guhan suddenly said. What condition? Wuzhang Shifang's face turned cold. I will not lower my standards. First place in the Ancient Sword tier? I wonder if it can be changed to first place in the Treasure Sword tier. Guhan smiled honestly. In 3 months, I will be a Treasure Sword tier sword wielder. Wuzhang Shifang was speechless. This guy called Guhan was really confident in himself. Chapter 275. Old Wang, has everything been arranged? In a small tea room, a man who looked to be in his 50s was carefully brewing tea leaves in his hands. If someone who was very familiar with tea leaves was here, they would jump in fright at first glance at these tea leaves. This man was brewing Da Hong Pao tea, and it was the most authentic Da Hong Pao tea. How many years had it been? Wui Mountain had long since become the headquarters of Yuanzhan's forces in the Eastern Immortal World. Obtaining a bit of Da Hong Pao from Wui Mountain was much more difficult than killing a universe Yuanzhan. Yet, this man actually had such a large amount of Da Hong Pao. This was simply unimaginable. It has been arranged. The young lady has been sent into the Dao fusion pool. Soak in it for a few days, and the Dao planted in the young lady's body will fuse with the young lady's body. This is a good opportunity for the young lady's strength to improve further, replied Old Wang, who was dressed in a long robe. Ari, I was too impatient this time. I didn't think that I would actually force out the true body of this poor lady. In this way, I'm afraid that this poor lady and that boy will not be able to separate. The middle-aged man sighed. This man was the mastermind behind Rina Takasaka, the current family head of the Fleeting family, and Liuyan Ling's father, Fleeting Shu. No, sir. The old family head was the one who gave the order, not you. It was the old family head who insisted on taking back the sword of Qingpin by force. You have always been against it. This has nothing to do with you, comforted Old Wang. Old Wang comforted Fleeting Shu. What he said was the truth. Fleeting Shu had once had a conflict with his father, Fleeting Wooden Fish. Unfortunately, Fleeting Wooden Fish's father's identity had overpowered Fleeting Shu, and Fleeting Shu had no choice but to agree to Fleeting Wooden Fish's plan and send the fake Rina Takasaka to steal the Sword of Virtue. There's nothing more to say. Take good care of the young lady. I'm going to look for my father. This matter is far from over. Fleeting Shu picked up a pot of Da Hong Pao and prepared to leave. My lord, what about the young lady? We tricked her into going to Chongyang Mountain. If she finds out that we lied to her, the entire Fleeting family will turn upside down, said the Dragon King when he saw that Fleeting Shu was about to leave. Who said I lied to Ling? A loving smile appeared on Fleeting Shu's face at the mention of Liuyan Ling. Hao Qianjendi has just contacted me. He has confirmed the changes in Chongyang Mountain. She's about to be born. Is that goddess finally going to be born? Laro Wang sucked in a breath of cold air. He was not afraid, but pleasantly surprised. Once the one from Chongyang Mountain was born, the possibility of smoothly passing through the Third Sword Desolation era would greatly increase. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, Guhan came out of the medical chamber and returned to his tent at Luoting Camp. The impact of what happened today on Guhan was second only to the incident 12 years ago when his family was destroyed. Similarly, the change in Guhan's outlook on life and values was also second only to the incident 12 years ago. The first thing he did when he returned to his tent was to place Qingpin on the bed and massage her back. After Qingpin fainted in Guhan's arms, she turned back into the adorable little Qingpin. She became the chubby and adorable Qingpin who stayed in Guhan's arms all day long, which healed Guhan's heart. However, Guhan was not sure whether Qingpin's personality would be the original adorable Qingpin or the noble, venomous-tongued girl, Qingpin. If it was the latter, then Guhan would be very worried about his future life. It would not be comfortable to live with that kind of Qingpin. After settling down Qingpin, Guhan sat quietly on the chair and did not say a word. He was trying hard to think and recall everything that happened today. He wanted to connect everything together and go through it carefully. In particular, the change in Qingpin was something that Guhan wanted to understand. Jiyu Han, who was in a coma, was not completely ignorant. At the very least, Jiyu Han was aware of the entire process of the green silk beheading entering his zifu and painting his entire sword scar green. Finally, he was dragged into the sword scar by a chain. Jiyu Han was aware of the entire process. Guhan also had a very comprehensive understanding of green hair sever's information. At that time, when Guhan saw that his sword scar was painted green, Guhan was already in despair. He also took it for granted that the sword scar between him and Qingpin would disappear, and Qingpin would be completely separated from him. But what happened next, Guhan could not imagine, especially that chain. This made Guhan recall the process of him synchronizing with Qingpin and giving birth to Qingpin. He remembered that at that time, Guhan saw a flash of a dozen chains binding Qingpin there. Thinking about it, the chain that pulled green hair sever back into the sword scar was one of the chains that bound Qingpin's body. Combined with the later appearance of Qingpin, the young girl Qingpin, who was strong enough to crush Yuan Ku at the Meteor Realm. Combining the information he knew, Guhan had such a guess. The young girl Qingpin should be Qingpin's true appearance, and the chain should be the spell that sealed Qingpin. Because green hair sever's attack on Qingpin's sword scar destroyed a part of the seal, or it could be said that it weakened part of the seal's power, which allowed Qingpin to temporarily escape from the state of being sealed and return to her original appearance. Similarly, because of the seal's power, the sword scar that should have disappeared miraculously preserved, allowing Guhan to still maintain the connection between him and Qingpin, and not be cut off by green hair sever's sword scar. But in the end, why did the chain grab green hair sever into the sword scar? Guhan did not quite understand. Could it be that the chain seal also had its own consciousness, and it was disgusted by green hair sever and wanted to retaliate? Also, After green hair sever was integrated into his sword scar, what kind of effect would it have on his sword scar? Would his sword scar leave behind any hidden dangers? These were all huge questions, and Guhan needed to think about it carefully. If something went wrong, it would be troublesome. Guhan was still thinking about his own matters when the tent's curtain was lifted, and Song Hammer rushed in. Seeing that Guhan was sitting calmly in the tent, Song Hammer's anxious face finally relaxed. "Sour Popsicle, where did you go for the whole afternoon? I couldn't find you for the whole afternoon, and I thought you were eaten by level Yuan Ku. You almost scared me to death." Song Hammer had originally accepted the task of guarding the Luoting mineral vein, but under Guhan's strong persuasion, Song Hammer dug in another mineral vein instead of staying with Guhan to complete the task. In the end, halfway through digging, he suddenly received an urgent notice to retreat to the Luoting camp and focus on defense. Song Hammer, who was afraid of death, naturally returned to the Luoting camp immediately. This time, he found out that level Yuan Ku Medusa, who was confirmed dead a few hundred years ago, appeared in the Luoting mineral vein. Thinking that Guhan was still in the Luoting mineral vein, Song Hammer began to frantically search for Guhan in the camp. However, after searching for a long time, he still could not find Guhan. He used his personal terminal to contact Guhan, but no one picked up. Song Hammer searched around the Luoting mineral vein a few times, and he decided to leave the Luoting mineral vein to look for Guhan in the number 1 battlefield. In Song Hammer's words, Guhan was his brother, and he wanted to see him alive or dead. In the end, before Song Hammer could leave the city, he received new news. Medusa had been defeated by the Sword Immortal, and the Miling mountain range was safe. This time, Song Hammer had no more worries. He was almost the first ancient sword wielder to rush into the Luoting mineral vein. After looking around, he naturally did not find Guhan. Therefore, Song Hammer expanded his search area to the entire Miling mountain range. He searched until 8 o'clock. Tired and hungry, Song Hammer decided to come back to eat something. In the end, he saw Guhan's tent lit up, so he rushed in. "You bastard, where the hell did you go?" Song Hammer punched Guhan in the chest. "Have you been turned into stone by Medusa? Why didn't you respond to my call?" "Be gentler, I just came out of the medical pod." Guhan slapped Song Hammer's hand. "You guessed it right. I was the first one to encounter Medusa. She turned me into meat paste with one move, and she also turned me into stone. If not for the Sword Immortal who saved my life in time, I would have died. I just came out of the Sword Immortal's medical pod. How could I have had time to respond to your call?" Ji Han covered up the matter with half of the truth. Many people knew that he was petrified by the Medusa, so there was no need to hide it. However, he could not tell anyone about Rina Takasaka. F***CK, Sour Popsicle, are you saying that you encountered Medusa and were saved by an immortal sword wielder? Song Hammer was stunned when he heard about Guhan's encounter. What kind of person was this brother of his? Both good and bad things had happened to him. "Tell me quickly, what does Medusa look like, Yuan Ku? What does the Sword Immortal look like? Who is his sword mistress?" Song Hammer asked about the details of the battle with Medusa, and Guhan told Song Hammer everything that he could tell. Song Hammer listened with great interest. He felt that it would be perfect if he had a plate of spicy crayfish next to him. "Right, I saw Chen Changsheng panicking just now. I heard that Rina Takasaka from her team has also gone missing. She seems to have chosen the Lotting Mine Guardian mission, just like you, and did not return to the camp. Did you see Rina Takasaka there?" Song Hammer was worried about his classmate, but he did not know that Rina Takasaka had almost turned Guhan into a cripple. Chapter 276. I saw her. Guhan acted as if nothing had happened. "But I only saw her once when I went in. I was petrified by Medusa, so I don't know what happened to her." That was all Ji Han said, but he didn't say anything else about Ban Lina. Guhan didn't plan to let this matter spread. There was no need to create unnecessary trouble. More importantly, he didn't want Song Hammer to be involved in this matter. What was more dangerous than Yuan Ku was the open and hidden attacks from his own people. This matter would be shouldered by Guhan alone. If an honest person like Song Hammer knew about it, who knew what would happen? Song Hammer was someone who could cut down a street for Guhan. Guhan had confirmed this since he was very young. After chatting with Song Hammer for a while, Guhan used tiredness as an excuse and sent Song Hammer out of the tent. In fact, Guhan was really tired. He went to bed early and laid down beside Qingpin, preparing to sleep. However, just as he closed his eyes, he heard his communicator ring. "You have a call from your good friend, Liuyan Ling. Would you like to accept it?" It was a call from Liuyan Ling. Hearing the name on the other end of the call, Guhan's face stiffened. Then, it began to change colors. It wasn't until the call beeped 5 times that Guhan pressed a button on his personal terminal. "Hello, what's up?" Guhan's tone didn't sound any different from usual. It was still cold and indifferent. Liuyan Ling, who was on the other end of the call, was quite used to it. "Can't I call you if there's nothing?" Liuyan Ling seemed to have heard this sentence often on television. Girls always liked to start with this sentence when they were being unreasonable. Once you heard this sentence, you almost knew that she was going to be unreasonable. "If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up." Guhan's words were blunt, but in fact, everyone could hear the threat and fraud in his words. However, Liuyan Ling did not hear it. "All right, I won't play with you anymore. I heard that something happened in the Miling mountain range, and a U-level Yuan Ku Medusa appeared. Is that true?" Liuyan Ling asked through the communicator. It seemed that she was no longer in Miling. She was still doing a mission with Guhan yesterday afternoon. "That's right, Medusa escaped from the Luoting mineral vein. I was inside, and I was petrified by her. I have to thank your Liuyan clan. Without your Liuyan clan, I would have died in there." Guhan's words contained hidden meaning. "What? You've been petrified by the Medusas?" Guhan could almost see Liuyan Ling's shocked expression through the communicator. "But why are you thanking the Liuyan clan? What has it got to do with us?" "Oh, I'm thanking you for your 5 fleeting techniques. At the crucial moment, your 5 fleeting techniques helped me delay for 0.01 seconds. Without that 0.01 seconds, I would have died." Guhan could not think of anything to do with the Liuyan clan, so he used a ridiculous excuse to fool her. "Idiot, when did you learn to be so glib?" Liuyan Ling did not think too deeply about Guhan's strange words. On the contrary, she felt a little sweet inside. Then, she thought of Guhan's prince seed and asked, "What about the prince seed? What happened to your prince seed?" "I thought about it. The interests of humanity outweigh my own, so I handed it over to Wu Zhongsha. Thanks to his med bay, I survived." Speaking of the med bay, the immortal sword-grade med bay was still in Guhan's dimensional pocket. Until now, Guhan still thought that the med bay belonged to Wu Zhongsha. He did not know that Sword Immortal by Colt, Ju Wudao, had played a supporting role. When he realized that Wu Zhongfang didn't want to take back the medical pod, Ji Yuhan naturally put the medical pod into his dimensional pocket. The med bay that belonged to Guhan had already been used by Guhan to save Ji Yun. Guhan happened to lack a med bay. That's good. It's good to help Grandpa Hao Tian. Grandpa Hao Tian liked me when I was young and gave me a teddy bear. Unfortunately, I killed it with a sword. Liuyan Ling said quietly. As a girl, Liuyan Ling could kill a cute teddy bear with a sword. There must be some interesting story behind this. "Oh, right. Where are you now? Didn't we agree to go to the Luoting mineral vein together today?" Guhan suddenly raised this question. According to yesterday's plan, Liuyan Ling should also stay with Guhan today. With Liuyan Ling, the eldest daughter of the Liuyan family, around, Wu Zhongsha did not have the guts to do anything to Guhan. However, early this morning, Liuyan Ling left Guhan a message that said, "There's an emergency. Sorry, I'll leave first." Then, she left Miling mountain range, leaving Guhan alone to face Wu Zhongsha. "Sorry, it's a family matter." Liuyan Ling replied, "The family asked me to go. As the next head of the family, I can't refuse." "All right. That's it. I'm tired. I need to rest now." With that, Guhan hung up the communication directly, leaving Liunian Ling alone on the other side. Ling, what are you doing? Did your boyfriend, your good husband, make you angry? A gentle and elegant young master of an aristocratic family appeared behind Liunian Ling. Wasn't this Xu Tianyuan of the noble scholar family that Guhan had met before? Yes. He just told me to drink more water and rest more. He was very concerned about me. Liunian Ling said through gritted teeth. Hehe, Ling, although I also want to rest for a while, we have to go. Uncle Yuan Ming said that there is a meteor stage Yuan Ku's nest nearby. We can't stay here for long. We have to get to Changyang Mountain before tomorrow evening. Xu Tianyuan said. As far as the eye could see, he and Liunian Ling were surrounded by a dozen or so people. Even further away from these people, there were a dozen or so sword maidens holding longswords observing their surroundings on high alert. It seemed that Liunian Ling had suddenly left Plum Ridge to rush to Changyang Mountain with Xu Tianyuan. Who knew what had happened at Changyang Mountain for Liunian Ling and Xu Tianyuan to rush there at full speed? After hanging up, Guhan fell into deep thought again. He was 80% sure that the power behind Takasaka Rina was the Liunian family. After all, Qingpin was the sword maiden of the Liunian calendar. No one in the world knew Qingpin better than the Liunian family. Although he did not know why Qingpin would appear in the sword burial grounds of Yuzhang City, it was obvious that the Liunian family had something to do with it. However, the conversation just now made him uncertain. If Liunian Ling wanted to snatch the Qingpin sword from him, she could have done it through Liunian Ling. He had not been wary of Liunian Ling for the past few days. Liunian Ling only needed to launch a sneak attack on him to snatch the Qingpin sword. There was no need to send a meteor stage like Takasaka Rina, Yuan Ku, to do it. That was why Guhan had used words to test Liunian Ling. If the Liunian family was really the mastermind, Liunian Ling's tone and attitude would have changed after such a thing happened. However, Guhan did not notice any change in Liunian Ling. She was exactly the same as the original Liunian Ling. Moreover, Guhan's intuition told Guhan that Liunian Ling did not know any of this. She was sincere to him. Then, who is the mastermind? Guhan scratched his head in frustration. Suddenly, Guhan thought of a possibility. The mastermind was still the Liunian family, but Liunian Ling was kept in the dark from beginning to end. She did not know that the Liunian family was planning to make a move against her. Moreover, because of Liunian Ling's existence, Takasaka Rina could not make a move with Liunian Ling around. Thinking of this, it was very suspicious for the Liunian family to suddenly let Liunian Ling leave Plum Ridge. It seemed to be to lure Liunian Ling away so that Takasaka Rina could make a move. The moment Liunian Ling left, Takasaka Rina made a move. This was the most obvious evidence. Unfortunately, this was all Guhan's guess. Without enough evidence, Guhan could not accurately determine who the mastermind was. He could only feel that the Liunian family was very likely. Forget it. Time to sleep. Since he could not figure it out, he did not bother thinking about it. Guhan was already very tired. After thinking for a while, Guhan felt like his mental state was about to explode. Ji Han shrunk his body back into the quilt and closed his eyes. A milky aroma directly rushed into Ji Han's nose. This is Qingpin's scent. And it's the scent of the cute Qingpin. The cute Qingpin and the young Qingpin had both been in Guhan's arms before. There was a clear difference in their body scents. The cute Qingpin's scent was like a sweet milky scent, while the young Qingpin's scent was like a lemon. The two scents were easy to distinguish, so Guhan could tell that Qingpin's scent had returned to its original milky scent. Are you back? My cute Qingpin? Guhan took a deep breath and pulled Qingpin into his arms. He kissed Qingpin's forehead and fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, Ji Han dreamt of thousands of soldiers and horses, an endless army that stretched all the way to the horizon. These soldiers and horses all wore iron masks on their faces. The war horses were strong, the soldiers were strong, and their weapons shone with a cold light. These soldiers stood there quietly and neatly in formation. That monstrous murderous aura fused together. It was as if the entire world was stunned by this murderous aura. Not even the slightest breeze could be felt. So although these soldiers raised their flags, Guhan could not see what was written on them. Guhan just stood in front of this army, on a towering wall. Behind him was a city. Guhan had to defend this city and live or die with it. That's right, there was also a tiger-like armored sword mistress beside Guhan. Chapter 277. When he woke up the next morning, Guhan had almost forgotten the scene in his dream. What he didn't know was that this scene would appear in front of him a few years later. Of course, these things were not important now. At this time, there were only 3 days left before the week-long internship outside the city ended. Guhan still had 3 accepted tasks in his hands that had not been completed at all. Guhan decided to take the time to complete these tasks as a cover for his next things. The remaining 3 tasks were basically the same task. They required Guhan to patrol certain areas and then kill Yuan Ku, who appeared in those areas to protect the safety of ordinary civilians nearby. It was a very simple task. As long as there was no ghost-level Yuan Ku or above, Guhan was confident that he could kill them. However, when it came to Qingpin, there was a problem. Qingpin, the cute girl, could not wake up no matter how hard Guhan tried. Even if Qingpin squeezed her chubby little face into dough, there was still no sign of Qingpin waking up. Maybe it's because I've consumed too much of my spirit, Guhan guessed. Transformation skills consumed a lot of spirit and physical strength. Perhaps Qingpin could not wake up because she was too tired. Guhan took out a brand new nursery bag from his dimensional pocket and hung it on it. Then, he put Qingpin in it. Fortunately, Guhan had specially prepared a nursery bag for Qingpin in his dimensional pocket. The previous nursery bag was still intact, except for the part with Qingpin's dimensional pocket that was still intact. The rest of the nursery bag had been torn into pieces by the fierce battle and could no longer be used. After leaving the tent, Song Hammer was already waiting for Guhan not far from the entrance with the cast cloud iron. They had agreed yesterday that they would act together to complete the task today. After yesterday's thrilling experience, Guhan no longer wanted to take any risks. He just wanted to spend this internship in peace and then return home to rest for a while. On the way to the patrol spot, Guhan heard a shocking news from Songhammer's mouth. Rina Kosaka had returned. However, she was not found at the place where Guhan fought her. Instead, she was found in a mine in the depths of the Luoting mine. When she was found, she was already in a deep coma. She only woke up after being treated in the medical bay. However, it seemed that Yuan Ku had injured her brain, causing her to lose some of her memories. It seemed that she had lost all of her memories after leaving the city for the internship. Hearing this news, Guhan understood that the discovered Rina Kosaka was probably the real Rina Kosaka. When she was kidnapped in the hover car, she had been in a coma and locked up somewhere. It was only when the fake Rina Takasaka failed that they placed the real Rina Takasaka deep in the ore vein, pretending that she had fainted from the Medusi's attack. It also perfectly explained why Rina Takasaka had lost her memory. The Medusi's attack must have damaged her brain. That was the perfect excuse. Regarding this, Guhan was very curious. Were the masterminds not afraid that he would reveal the whole process to the Kensi? As long as he told them everything, all of their disguises would be meaningless. Or perhaps, they were already certain that he wouldn't reveal this matter. If that was the case, then their understanding of him had reached a terrifying level. They could even guess his style of doing things. The process of completing the mission with Song Hammer was very smooth. Although they did meet some stupid Yuan Ku during their patrol, they were all rat tier and tiger tier low-level Yuan Ku. Guhan did not even have to do anything as Song Hammer could finish them off. The next 3 days were smooth sailing. It seemed that after the ordeal with Medusa and Rina Kosaka, Guhan's luck had returned to normal. However, in these 3 days, Guhan's expression grew uglier. This was because 3 days had passed, but Qingpin was still in a coma. If not for Guhan's passive ability to turn Qingpin into his sword form, Guhan would have thought that his sword maiden had fallen into a long slumber. Guhan searched on the internet for a long time. There were many cases of sword maidens in a long slumber, but there were very few solutions. There was almost only one way: let the sword maiden wake up on her own, or seek help from an alchemist. Asking a swordsmith for help was just like how Ji Yu Han had healed King Yu. asking a swordsmith to heal the heavily injured King Yu. However, King Yu only sought help from an alchemist when he was almost completely damaged. On the other hand, Pauper was only asleep, and he was even snoring. Swordsmiths all used the same method to repair the Sword Maiden. They would place the Sword Maiden in the furnace and reforge it. No matter what kind of illness it was, they would follow this method. Unless absolutely necessary, Ji Yu-han wouldn't bear to let Pauper reforge it in the furnace. Besides, Ji Yu-han didn't want others to touch his Pauper. 3 days later, when the class gathered again, Qingpin was still sleeping in Guhan's infant pouch. "Students of class 22694, I haven't seen you for a week. I wonder how you've been these days. Have you learned anything about the real world of the sword-bearers?" Luo Fan, the homeroom teacher, walked to the front of the class and started lecturing. This was the first time Guhan saw Luo Fan in a week. "Alright, you guys know better than me when it comes to experience, so I won't say much. I am very sorry to inform everyone that during this week, 2 students from our class 22,694 have left us forever." Although Luo Fan said it was regretful, Guhan didn't hear any real regret in his tone. Obviously, this situation was a norm for Luo Fan. Every time he brought the freshmen out of the city for practical training, such a tragedy would happen. It was also a norm for the whole of Yuzhong University. Otherwise, the 10% death rate for each class was no joke. It was a statistic that was supported and calculated by detailed statistics. Guhan scanned the entire class 22694. Sure enough, there were 2 fewer students in the queue. One was Liuonian Ling, and the other was probably the unlucky one who had died. The moment they heard that someone had died, the whole team was in an uproar. Although most of them had guessed that someone might die in this training, when death really came, everyone felt a great fear in their hearts. This time, the one who died was called Ji Yu Xiu. Next time, would it be them? Stand still. Sooner or later, all of you will die too. Luo Fan snorted coldly. The whole line calmed down. Student Ji Yu Xiu, a cute student, bravely went to the ore vein to mine alone. Unfortunately, he encountered the tiger-grade Yuan Ku and died. Luo Fan quietly read out the unfortunate student's name. If he hadn't abandoned his Sword Maiden and died when Yuan Ku broke through his protective shield while he was running away, I would have praised him. Ji Yu Xiu, student number 18, likes to play the flute. Guhan silently recalled Ji Yu Xiu's information. Guhan remembered that when Ji Yu Xiu introduced himself, he specifically mentioned that he was good at playing the flute and hoped to become a musician in the future. The tiger-grade Yuan Ku is not a strong opponent. Student Ji Yu Xiu's Sword Maiden had a chance to kill it as long as student Ji Yu Xiu commanded his Sword Maiden seriously. But he didn't care and ran away like a mortal. Such a person, if not him, who will die? Even though Ji Yu Xiu was already a dead man, Luo Fan still unceremoniously criticized him, and then used his death as an example to teach the other students a lesson. If I die this time, I might just be a typical example of failure in the teacher's mouth. Guhan smiled bitterly. In his heart, he was even more determined to not die. At least, he must not die before achieving his dream. However, there are 2 students who performed very well. After using Ji Yu Xiu's death to teach the other students a lesson, Luo Fan began to praise them. The Luoting camp specially sent a letter of thanks to our student Guhan for informing the authorities about the appearance of Medusa, giving them enough time to evacuate the humans from the Luoting camp. And Rina Takasaka, she was the one who informed Guhan about the appearance of Medusa before she fainted. Without the efforts of these 2 students, the number of human casualties in this Medusa incident would not be in the single digits. Alright, I hereby announce that the practical training is over. Everyone will take the hover car back to Yuzhong City. Remember to submit your mission at the Swordsman Mission Center. The Swordsman Mission Center will report back to me on the completion of your mission. If anyone fails to complete their mission, I won't hold back on your credits. Finally, the 1-week practical training was over. When Guhan returned to his seat, he looked a little absent-minded. Guhan would probably never forget what he had experienced that day. Also, why was Qingpin in his arms still sleeping? Didn't she know that Guhan wanted to feed her meat? Hello, are you Guhan? Just as Guhan was thinking about this, a familiar voice rang in his ears. Guhan looked up and saw Rina Takasaka's familiar face. Guhan almost pulled out his sword and killed her. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. This Rina Takasaka was not a fake, but the real Rina Takasaka. Although I've lost my memory for the past few days, I heard from my friend that you've been taking good care of me. Thank you. Rina Takasaka stretched out one hand in front of Guhan and used the other to tuck her bangs behind her ears. The sunlight shone on her from behind, making her look particularly dazzling. You're welcome. Guhan squeezed Rina Takasaka's hand tightly. You've taken good care of me too. We're even now. Chapter 278. The hover car made its way back to Yuzhong City without a hitch. When they got off the hover car, they arrived at the Swordbearer Quest Center. Guhan picked up a few barren dimensional crystals, each worth more than 3,000 quarks of sword element. He and Song Hammer handed in their quests. In addition to the other 5 quests, the two of them had a total of 58 hero coins. This was not a lot. Ji Han still had to pay 50 hero coins as tax every month. After deducting the 50, he only had 8 hero coins left. Although the Swordbearer Quest Center had a place to exchange hero coins, when Guhan saw that he had 50 hero coins left, he didn't want to go there. What could he buy with 50 hero coins? After handing in the mission, the next thing they needed to do was to return to their respective homes. On the way back, Song Hammer kept on chattering, while Ji Han only responded with a few words. When they were about to reach the entrance of Sanqing Mountain, Guhan raised his head and said to Song Hammer, "Toad, I'm going to the Swordbearer Quest Center tomorrow." "Oh," Song Hammer said. It was normal for swordbearers to go to the Swordbearer Quest Center, so there was nothing strange about it. Go. What are you talking about? But let me tell you something first. My mom will definitely be worried about me and my 2 cute little siblings. They can talk to me for 2 to 3 hours every night. I've already promised them that I'll take them to the amusement park tomorrow. I don't have the time to accompany you to the Swordbearer Service Center to forge for your family's poor family. Song Hammer thought that Ji Han wanted him to accompany him to the Swordsman Service Center to reforge something for Penniless Priest. Song Hammer also knew that Penniless Priest had not woken up for 3 days. "No, I'm not going to find a blacksmith. I'm going to Sword Tower," Guhan said. "If you want to go to the Sword Pavilion, just go to the Sword Pavilion. Why do you make it sound as if it's a treasure sword?" Song Hammer suddenly stopped talking and walking. She stood there in a daze for a long while before grabbing Guhan's arm. F***CK, what are you going to do in the Sword Pavilion? Don't tell me that you already have 1,000 quarks of sword essence. Yes, it's full. Guhan nodded. This nod made Song Hammer fall into a trance. F***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***C asterisk CKF asterisk CKF asterisk CKF asterisk CKF asterisk CK. Even a genius like me only has 400 quarks of sword essence. You're just a guy with 9 quarks of sword essence. What kind of medicine did you take to suddenly have 1000 quarks of sword essence? You're twice as fast as I am. I can't live like this anymore. I was the one who became an ancient sword wielder first. What do you mean you became an ancient sword wielder first? A few black lines appeared on Guhan's forehead. We both became ancient sword wielder on the same day, okay? Song Hammer choked and quickly corrected himself. That's because I reached 200 quarks of sword essence first. That can't be wrong, right? Yes, you first. Guhan was speechless. However, he could understand Song Hammer's feelings. When Song Hammer was young and found out that his innate sword essence had stopped growing at 9 quarks, Song Hammer had told Guhan very seriously that he would protect Guhan in the future. He wanted to be Guhan's protector. Many times, when the young Guhan was bullied by others, it was Song Hammer who took the initiative to stand in front of Guhan. Although after Guhan mastered sword techniques, no one could beat Guhan. However, Song Hammer really did treat himself as Guhan's protector. Although Guhan later became the military governor and possessed extraordinary strength, Song Hammer still felt that he was one step ahead of Guhan in terms of sword essence. After all, Guhan's innate sword essence was too little. This meant that Guhan's innate sword essence could not increase too quickly after Guhan's innate sword essence. But now, Ji Yuhan had actually reached 1,000 quarks of sword elements before him. This made Song Hammer lose his last bit of support as a guardian. Therefore, Song Hammer was very unhappy. His entire body was in a bad mood. Forget it, forget it. Sour Popsicle, it's a good thing that you have 1,000 quarks of sword essence. It's your turn to protect me in the future. Song Hammer's personality had many flaws. He was careless, lazy, and lacked perseverance. However, when it came to optimism, he was one of the best. However, you have to tell me how you managed to reach 1,000 quarks of sword essence. Song Hammer was still somewhat indignant. Don't tell me that you improved it through the battles over the past few days. Your Qingpin doesn't even move. The sword essence in the dimensional vortex was absorbed by my Qingpin. Where are you going to absorb sword essence? Well, sometimes, Song Hammer's intelligence was worth looking forward to. Upon hearing Song Hammer's question, Guhan took a deep breath. Toad, I'm only telling you about this. You are not allowed to tell anyone else. Do you understand? F***ck, what's the matter? Why are you so serious, Sour Popsicle? Song Hammer scoffed, but he couldn't laugh anymore. This was because Guhan had told Song Hammer everything about the sword essence oral fluid without hiding a single word. The reason why Guhan was so honest was because he knew that Song Hammer was a trustworthy brother. If Guhan couldn't even trust Song Hammer, his life would become extremely tragic. Furthermore, the 8-city sword meet was about to begin. When the time came, the growth of sword essence would be even more terrifying. It was impossible to hide it from someone close to him for a long time. When the time came, it would only sow the seeds of a rift between him and Song Hammer. Therefore, Guhan chose to confess about the sword essence oral fluid to Song Hammer. After that, Song Hammer was completely dumbfounded. He spent a full 20 minutes before he reluctantly believed Guhan's words. His body could convert the sword essence oral fluid to a 100%. Perhaps this is God's compensation to you for being a sour popsicle. Song Hammer let out a long sigh. F***ck, if only I was born with 9 quarks of sword essence. What the F***ck? Welcome home, master. After opening the door, when Mayun knelt in front of Guhan and helped Guhan take off his shoes. Then, a strong sour smell filled the room. When Mayun, who was kneeling on the ground and facing Guhan's foot, almost fainted from the smell. I've been out for a few days. It's normal. Guhan blushed. Go fill the tub. I'm going to take a shower. You can wash my shoes too. Yes, master. Although the strong smell made when Mayun dizzy, weak in her limbs, and nauseous, when Mayun felt a little dizzy. However, when Mayun still maintained a gentle and obedient attitude due to her good manners as a maid. That's why it's good to be a maid. You can still be gentle in this manner. If it's a wife, she would directly scold you. Oh right, a maid only needs you to pay her salary every month, but a wife needs you to write her name on the property ownership certificate. That's why it's good to be a maid. Youngsters, when you have money in the future, you can just find a maid. Why do you need a wife? When Mayun went to prepare a bath for Guhan. Meanwhile, Guhan walked into his bedroom. A week had passed. The little girl who looked exactly like Ji Yun was still lying in the medical pod. No wonder Qingpin saved you. Both of you are idiots who like to sleep. Guhan let out a long sigh. He carried Qingpin out of the baby pouch and placed him beside Ji Yun's medical pod. Then, Guhan sat quietly by the bed and looked at the 2 people closest to him. He didn't say a word for a long time. Master, the bath is full and the temperature is suitable. Do you want to enter the bath now? When Mayun walked to Guhan and asked. Okay, I'm going to take a bath. Take care of these 2 people. Guhan instructed and walked directly into the bath. When Guhan entered the bath, when Mayun suddenly realized that Guhan entered the bath empty-handed. He didn't bring a bathrobe or anything like that. In desperation, when Mayun could only take out a bathrobe from Guhan's wardrobe. Then, she opened the door of the bath and placed the bathrobe on the hanger. "Master, your bathrobe is here." After reminding Guhan, when Mayun planned to leave quietly, she was afraid that it would be like the last time. Guhan ordered her to scrub his back. In the end, what she was afraid of naturally came true. When Mayun had just put down the bathrobe when she heard Guhan's voice. "Don't go. Help me scrub my back." Since the master had given the order, the maid had no right to refuse. When Mayun could only slowly untie her clothes. She only wore a white cotton underwear and walked into the bath. First, she laboriously rubbed the dead skin and dirt on Guhan's back, which were the so-called mud balls. Needless to say, when Mayun really did make a lot of densely packed mud balls, the feeling of happiness and satisfaction in her heart was indescribably exhilarating. "Master, turn around. It's time for the front, master. Master." When Mayun finally finished rubbing the back. When she gathered her courage and was ready to rub the front for Guhan, she found that no matter how she shouted, Guhan still didn't turn around. Therefore, when Mayun could only use her strength to turn the heavy Guhan over. Only then did she find that Guhan had closed his eyes, breathed evenly, and entered a dream. "It seems that master is really tired this time." When Mayun sighed. It was the first time she saw Guhan so tired. "But, do I still rub the front for master now?" When Mayun hesitated for a long time and finally decided to complete her task. Starting from Guhan's neck, from top to bottom, she completely rubbed it. Even little Guhan was the same. Because she was afraid that the rough bath towel would wake Guhan up, when Mayun could only use her own hands to rub Guhan. Little Guhan was naturally an exception. When Mayun also carefully cleaned the dirt nearby. Little Guhan rubbed a few times in when Mayun's hands, and there was a trend of it growing bigger and bigger. However, it seemed that because Guhan had fallen asleep, the shy when Mayun suddenly became very calm. She didn't avoid little Guhan at all. Instead, she stopped what she was doing for more than 10 seconds and stared at little Guhan in a daze. In the end, that night, a faint mosquito-like sound could be heard from when Mayun's room. Well, it wasn't dirty at all. Chapter 279. When Guhan opened his eyes again, he found himself still lying in the bathroom. The water temperature in the bathtub was still maintained at an appropriate temperature. It could be seen that when Mayun had been controlling the water temperature for Guhan. Guhan stretched and stood up from the bathtub. He wiped off the water droplets, put on a bathrobe, and returned to his bedroom. He found that everything in his bedroom was normal. The medical pod and Ching Pin were lying quietly on his bed. However, the lid of the medical pod had been opened. Wait, the lid of the medical pod was opened? Guhan was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly walked to the side of the medical pod and looked inside. It was empty. There was no one inside. Ji-Yu-Yun, where's Ji-Yu-Yun? Guhan was shocked. He turned his bedroom upside down, but he didn't see Ji-Yu-Yun at all. Then, Guhan rushed out of the bedroom and shouted for Wen Mayun. "Wen Mayun, where are you? Come out. Master! Master! Mayun is here." Wen Mayun ran out of a small bedroom in a panic with a broom in her hand. Looking at her dusty appearance, she should be cleaning. "Where's Ji-Yu-Yun? Where's my sister?" Seeing Wen Mayun's confused face, Guhan remembered that Wen Mayun didn't know who Ji-Yu-Yun was, nor did she know who her sister was. It's that little girl. The little girl who has been lying in the medical pod. Where did she go? Did you see her just now? Sorry, master. Mayun didn't pay attention. Mayun has been cleaning in a few small bedrooms, when Mayun replied. Suddenly, a clatter sound came from the kitchen. Guhan reacted instantly and rushed into the kitchen. He found that the entire kitchen was in a mess. All kinds of pots and pans had fallen to the ground. Even when Mayun's half-cooked rice cooker had been thrown down, and all the rice in the cooker had been spilled. He ha ha ha. At this time, such a sound came from a small room in the kitchen. It sounded like a child's laughter. What's in that small room? Guhan asked Wen Mayun. Master, that's a warehouse used to store ingredients, Wen Mayun quickly replied. That's right, There's also a blue and white fish. I remembered that Master is coming back today, so I spent a lot of money to buy a blue and white fish to nourish Master's body. Fish was also an expensive ingredient in the base cities. Since there was a high demand for space to breed fish, the production of fish had always been small. Naturally, the price of fish had risen. Even the sword-bearers couldn't afford to eat fish every day with their monthly income. Of course, for a sword-bearer like Guhan, it was easy for him to eat fish every day. Ingredients: blue and white fish. Guhan decisively pushed open the door. The first thing he saw was a large refrigerator, followed by a large glass fishing rod with a live fish and a little girl. Wait, what the hell is a little girl in a fish tank? In the fish tank, a big blue and white fish was swimming forward with all its might, trying to escape for its life. Because behind it, a naughty child was swimming behind it, trying to catch its tail. Although it was only a small fish tank that was less than 1 square meter, the human and the fish fully displayed the tenacity of life, as well as the predator's desire for prey. Speaking of which, this little girl's swimming skills were really ugly, worse than a dog's crawl. Although this big blue and white fish had a strong desire for life and swam very fast, it was a pity. Unfortunately, it was trapped in such a small fish tank and faced a predator that was dozens of times its size. After being forced into a corner, it was helplessly held in the girl's arms. But soon, this little girl was also targeted by a new predator. A big hand grabbed the little girl's neck and then pulled her out of the fish tank, just like how someone pulled Ching Pin's neck. If Ching Pin was pulled out of the fish tank by the neck by Guhan, she would probably try to escape with all her hands and feet. But after Ji Yu Yun was caught, she did not shout or make a fuss. She just hugged her big blue and white fish tightly in her arms. This scene was similar to the fat baby in the New Year painting who had fish every year. Brother, I'll give you fish. Ji Yu Yun, who was caught, closed her eyes and thought for a while. Then, she held up the big blue and white fish tightly. It seemed that she was going to give it to Guhan. Although the fish looked a little tempting, Guhan's attention was not on the fish at all. Guhan asked Ji Yu Yun in a daze, "What did you call me?" "Brother." Ji Yu Yun tilted her head. "Aren't you my brother? You still owe me a few hot and sour shredded potatoes." "Mph, don't try to deny it." Was this really his sister, Ji Yu Yun? Listening to Ji Yu Yun's words, it seemed that she was Guhan's dead sister, Ji Yu Yun. Although Guhan did not violate his morals and brought Ji Yu Yun back for treatment, completely ignoring the possibility of Ji Yu Yun's parents and relatives, that was only because she looked too similar to his sister, Ji Yu Yun. But that was only because she looked too similar to his younger sister, Ji Yu Yun. Coupled with the fact that his parents' ashes had exploded, Ji Yu Han had forcefully brought Ji Yu Yun back. All he wanted was just a little bit of comfort in his heart. In fact, Guhan knew in his heart that this girl could not be his sister, Ji Yu Yun. At most, she looked a little similar. After calming down, Guhan regained his senses. Originally, he planned to send this girl who looked like Ji Yu Yun back to her parents and end this wrong behavior. But he never expected that after this girl who looked like Ji Yu Yun woke up, her first reaction was to call him brother. She even said that he owed her a few hot and sour shredded potatoes. This made Guhan's heart suffer a great impact, and he became a little confused again. "Mayun, did you tell her about me?" Guhan's first reaction was that when Mayun told this girl about his basic situation. "No, master, Mayun has never told Miss about these things. This is also the first time Mayun has seen Miss awake." When Mayun waved her hand, it didn't seem like she was lying. "Smelly brother, you actually suspect me. Xiaoyun doesn't want to be with you anymore." When Ji Yu Yun heard Guhan's words, she immediately pulled a long face. "Quickly put me down, I want to eat fish." "Eat fish?" Guhan subconsciously looked at the big blue and white fish in Ji Yu Yun's arms. Good heavens, Ji Yu Yun had already taken a bite from the fish. "How can you eat fish like this? Quickly throw it away." When Guhan saw Ji Yu Yun eat the fish raw, he immediately became anxious. His sister never had the habit of eating raw fish. Therefore, Guhan forcefully took the big blue and white fish from Ji Yu Yun's hands, and then ordered Wen Mayun to throw this unlucky big blue and white fish back into the kitchen. Give me back my fish, my fish. Seeing that her beloved big blue and white fish was taken away, Ji-Yoon immediately became irritable and struggled. If it wasn't for the strength of Gu-han's arms, she would have really broken free. Don't mess around, I'll let Mayun cook that fish, you can eat it slowly later. Gu-han's face darkened, and he scolded. Ji-Yoon gradually became obedient, sat on the chair at the dining table, and said pitifully, "Brother, ask sister-in-law to add more soy sauce. Xiaoyun's taste is a bit stronger." "What did you say?" Ji-Yoon didn't know why the word sister-in-law popped out of his mouth, but he quickly realized that Ji-Yoon must have mistaken Wen Mayun as his wife. "That's my maid, not your sister-in-law." Gu-han knocked on the table. "Let me ask you, are you really my sister, Ji-Yoon? You're so annoying, brother, why don't you believe that I'm your sister?" Ji-Yoon pouted. "When I was 3 years old, you lied to me and said that if I planted my New Year's money in the ground, it would grow a lot of New Year's money the next day. You cheated me of more than 10 yuan. In the end, you used it to buy cartoons and got beaten by Mom. Don't you remember?" This. A few black lines appeared on Gu-han's forehead. It seemed that there was indeed such a thing. At that time, it was popular to collect cartoons of the 24 Gendi and the 72 Sword Immortals. In order to collect all of them, he did spend his New Year's money and Ji-Yoon's New Year's money. If Ji-Yoon hadn't suddenly mentioned it, Gu-han would have almost forgotten about his dark history. "Oh, by the way, you and Song Hammer used Mom's clothes as a cloak to play the game of Gendi War. In the end, you stepped on a big hole and even bribed me with lollipops, asking me not to tell Mom." Another dark history that Gu-han didn't want to mention was revealed by Ji-Yoon. "Oh, by the way, and..." The more Ji-Yoon talked, the more addicted she became. When she was about to continue, Gu-han knocked on the table hard, and his face was full of sadness. "Don't talk about the past. I don't want to recall those memories." "Oh, then I won't talk about it." Ji-Yoon also lowered her head, and seemed to have fallen into a kind of misery. The two of them were silent for a long time, and didn't say a word. They only heard the sound of the big blue flower fish being cooked in the pot in the kitchen. "Do you know that my sister is already dead?" The reason why Gu-han was silent was because he was hesitant and conflicted about whether he should ask this question or not. Asking him to personally say that his sister was already dead was undoubtedly a kind of painful torture for Gu-han. "Is Xiaoyun really dead?" Ji-Yoon's expression was gloomy, so what happened that day was true. Xiaoyun thought that Xiaoyun was just sleeping and had a dream, but it turns out that Xiaoyun is really dead. Then, after some communication, Gu-han roughly understood Ji-Yoon's situation. According to Ji-Yoon's explanation, Ji-Yoon had always thought that what happened that day was a dream. When she woke up, she appeared on the road, and then she was taken away by a perverted man who wanted to humiliate her. Then, it was the story of the cute Ching Pin saving the lowly. Ji-Yoon didn't have any memory of the period from her death until last week. She just kept saying that she was sleeping and didn't know anything. However, Ji-Yoon still retained the memory before the big attack, and it seemed that she had retained it very clearly. Many of the memories that even Gu-han had forgotten, Ji-Yoon also remembered clearly. Moreover, from the perspective of cognition, expression, and personality, although Ji-Yoon still retained many of the thoughts and behaviors of a child, in general, her personality state was more like a 16-year-old girl. Not considering death, Ji-Yoon should indeed be a 16-year-old girl this year. Chapter 280. In the end, Gu-han still couldn't confirm whether the Ji-Yoon in front of him was his sister or not. But faced with Ji-Yoon's identical face, and Ji-Yoon's childhood memories that popped up from time to time, Gu-han couldn't chase her away. If a loved one who had died suddenly appeared in front of you, and everything was the same as before, then I believe that everyone here wouldn't be able to stop her from living in your life. However, Gu-han still maintained a certain degree of vigilance against Ji-Yoon. When Ji-Yoon asked to sleep together like before, Gu-han decisively rejected her request. He let Ji-Yoon stay in a small bedroom and specifically told Wen Mayun to turn on the camera in Ji-Yoon's room 24 hours a day to monitor every detail of Ji-Yoon's life. With Rina Takasaka's experience by his side, Gu-han couldn't trust any stranger, especially Ji Yoon, who looked so much like his sister. Maybe she was a spy or an assassin planted by the mastermind behind Rina Takasaka. Guhan had to be careful when dealing with her. While eating, Guhan noticed that Ji Yoon was different from before. For example, when Ji Yoon was young, she never ate fish, but now, she was addicted to fish. It was even more excessive than Qingpin's love for meat. When Mayun served the braised blue and white flour fish, Ji Yoon monopolized the whole plate. As she ate, she stared at Guhan warily, as if she was afraid that Guhan would snatch her big blue and white flour fish away. Recalling the scene when she jumped into the fish tank to catch the fish and hugged it tightly, Guhan started to have a headache. It seemed that among the girls that his family took in, other than Mayun, who was normal, the rest were all F*King problematic. Xiaoyun, why do you like eating fish so much? I remember when you were young, you would never eat the fish that my mother brought back. Ji Yuhan suddenly asked. Phut, brother, when did we eat fish when we were young? Mom even had to calculate for a few minutes to buy a piece of potato. When will our family be able to afford to buy fish? Ji Yun looked at Guhan with disdain. That's right, Guhan had never eaten fish when he was a child. Guhan was just testing Ji Yun's little trick. If Ji Yun was pretending, then in the face of such a sudden question, she would definitely give herself away. Brother, I don't know why either. Ever since I woke up and smelled fish, I couldn't help but want to eat it. I also wonder how I became like this. With that, Ji Yun ate the last mouthful of fish, and then burrowed into Guhan's arms, looking at Guhan with misty eyes. Brother, let's eat fish every day, okay? Whatever. Guhan nodded. He was never picky about what he ate, but it gave Mayun a shock. She remembered that a big blue and white fish cost tens of thousands. Even if she bought the cheapest fish every day, the 200,000 yuan given by Guhan was still a drop in the bucket. Mayun couldn't afford this amount of money, so she stammered and wanted to raise the issue of money. In the end, her personal terminal suddenly beeped. She took a look and saw that Ji Yuhan had directly transferred 1 million renminbi into her account. Mayun immediately shut her mouth. She didn't know when her master had become such a nouveau riche. It had only been a few days, and it seemed like a month ago, he was still fussing over her 1 million renminbi. After eating, Guhan went straight back to his bed. Because of his doubts about Ji Yun's true identity, this caused Guhan's original happiness for Ji Yun's resurrection to weaken a lot. Looking at Qingpin, who was still unconscious beside him, Guhan completely lost his happy mood. He held Qingpin's small hand, feeling the non-existent body temperature of Qingpin. Brother, is this your daughter? Suddenly, Ji Yun's voice came into his ear. This guy ran to Guhan's bed and saw Guhan holding Qingpin's hand tightly, so he naturally guessed. From this point of view, Ji Yun was still quite pure. If it was someone like Otaku, he would directly ask if this was the little Lolita raised by Guhan's family. No, this is your brother's sword lady, Qingpin. Guhan replied. Hey, brother, you actually became a sword bearer. That's amazing. Haha, little Yun's brother is a sword bearer. Hearing that her brother was a sword wielder, Ji Yun excitedly jumped up and down on the bed. Seeing this, Ji Yuhan felt a bit annoyed, but at the same time, he felt a bit of warmth in his heart. He really hoped that Ji Yun was his little sister. With such a little sister by his side, his life wouldn't be so painful. But brother, why is your sword lady only a little taller than Ji Yun? After jumping around for a long time, Ji Yun had a new question. She realized that there was something wrong with Qingpin's height. Guhan, the sword ladies on TV are all as tall as mother. I don't know. Guhan was too lazy to answer this question. Also, why is she sleeping all the time? Let her play with Ji Yun, okay? Ji Yun had a new idea. If you can wake her up, you can do it. Guhan curled his lips. If Ji Yun could wake up Qingpin, it would not be a problem for Guhan to play with her. Guhan would be very happy. Ji Yun, in the historical TV series, if someone is sick, just feed him a round elixir of immortality, Ji Yun said absent-mindedly. Then, she took out a shiny bead from her pocket and stuffed it into Qingpin's mouth. What did you put into Qingpin's mouth? Ji Han was caught off guard for a moment, and actually allowed Ji Yun to stuff such a strange thing into the poor man's mouth. What if the poor man's stomach got spoiled from eating it? I don't know, but I think it looks like an elixir of immortality. Ji Yun smiled. Gu Han patted his head. Just now, he vaguely glanced at the so-called elixir, and it looked very familiar. Good Lord, isn't that my remaining dimensional crystal stone? Looking at the color, it's a baron. Oh my god, how did Ji Yun stuff that thing into Qingpin's mouth? Gu Han quickly opened Qingpin's mouth, but it was too late. The dimensional crystal stone was no longer in his mouth. It was probably eaten by Qingpin. Little Yun, where did you get that stone from? Gu Han's face was cold. I took it from brother's pocket. Ji Yun pointed to the dimensional pocket on the table. She can open my dimensional pocket. Gu Han was really shocked this time. The dimensional pocket was bound to his bloodline. Other than him, even a sword wielder at the fairy sword tier could not force it open. Otherwise, the space in the dimensional pocket would most likely shatter, and the items inside would be lost into the dimensional gap. Otherwise, Wuzhang Shifang would not have asked him. He could have just snatched the dimensional pocket and opened it. There was only one way to open someone else's dimensional pocket, and that was if the person who opened it had a certain blood relationship with the owner. It was not certain that it could be opened, but there was a certain chance that it could be opened. The closer the blood relationship, the better. For example, the parents and children of the sword wielder had about a 50% chance of opening the dimensional pocket of the sword wielder. As for biological brothers and sisters, there was a 25% chance that they were more than 3 generations of direct blood relatives. Then, this chance was infinitely close to 0. If Ji Yun could open his own dimensional pocket, didn't that mean that Ji Yun and he were really related by blood? Gu Han suddenly felt that he had become a lot dumber after coming back from Plum Ridge. If he wanted to know if Ji Yun was his sister, it was easy. He just had to do a blood test. Things at the genetic level could not be faked. Gu Han decided that he would bring Ji Yun to do a paternity test with him tomorrow. Oh, no, a biological brother and sister test. If he could prove that he was related by blood, then even if Ji Yun was a spy or an assassin, Gu Han would accept it. Just as he was thinking about these things, suddenly, Gu Han heard Qingpin murmur, "Smelly Gu Han, Qingpin wants to eat meat." Qingpin spoke. Ji Han was overjoyed. Ever since he fell into a deep slumber, he had not said a single word. Who would have thought that at this moment, he would suddenly speak? Could it be that this was a sign that he was about to awaken? Gu Han waited for a long time, but Qingpin only said that one sentence in his sleep. There was no other movement. Could it be the effect of that dimensional crystal just now? Gu Han suddenly thought of the dimensional crystal that Ji Yun had shoved into Qingpin's mouth. Little Yun, do you have any more of those stones? It's not a stone. It's a pill. Ji Yun pouted her lips and pulled out 3 more barons. Cheapskate, Ji Yun only took out 3. I'll give them back to you, cheapskate. I'll give you something better later. Gu Han patted Ji Yun's forehead and took the 3 barons from her hands. Then, he put them into Qingpin's mouth. Sure enough, after eating these dimensional crystals, poor Qing's complexion clearly improved a lot. He could even move his fingers and toes a little. I understand. Qingpin's transformation consumes a lot of her energy. She needs a dimensional crystal with sword elements to replenish her energy. Gu Han, you are so smart. How could you not think of such a simple thing? Gu Han immediately took the dimensional bag and fed all the Viscount and Baron species. Although she looked better, Qingpin still showed no signs of waking up. Continue. Gu Han was not stingy. He put the Earl species into Qingpin's mouth one by one. When all the Marquis species were used up, Qingpin was still not awake. She could roll around, squirm, and talk in her sleep. Continue. Ji Han brought out the rest of the Marquis seeds. When the first Marquis seed entered his stomach, Qing Pauper jumped out of bed. Stupid Gu Han. Qingpin wants to eat meat. Qingpin doesn't want to eat stones. Chapter 281. Qingpin finally woke up. Regardless of whether the answer was the reason Guhan had guessed that Qingpin had insufficient sword essence in her body. Qingpin's cute body could not be judged by the standard of a sword mistress. To Guhan's relief, Qingpin's personality returned to being cute after waking up. Guhan had intentionally asked Qingpin about the young girl Qingpin, but Qingpin had blinked her cute eyes, indicating that she did not know anything. She said that she completely forgot what happened after she tried to shatter the sword that day. When she woke up, she saw Guhan staring at her with an infatuated look. It was disgusting. All in all, because of Qingpin's awakening, Guhan became happy. Until the next morning, he still had a rare smile on his face. This made Jiyu Yun, who was next to Guhan, stare at Guhan strangely, as if to say that this lolicon was not her biological brother. All in all, it was a happy day. Guhan took Jiyu Yun to the Swordbearers Service Center's medical center, intending to give Jiyu Yun a blood test. However, there was a problem. Jiyu Yun did not have a personal terminal, which was like a modern person without an identity card. It was impossible to get a blood test for Jiyu Yun through the proper channels. Even if Guhan was a swordbearer, the medical center would not care about Guhan at all. They received a sea of swordbearers every year. Who the hell would care about an ancient swordbearer like Guhan? They would have to wait until Guhan became a famed swordbearer. Therefore, Guhan had to go through some unorthodox or backdoor means. He had to secretly get a blood test for Jiyu Yun through a doctor he was familiar with. Jiyu Han calculated for a moment. In the entire Yuzhang city, there was only one doctor that Jiyu Han could say he was familiar with, and that was Song Fei, the genius doctor who had formed a miraculous relationship with Jiyu Han from the beginning of the 100 quarks of sword element test. He had also helped him hide the fact that he had 1,119 quarks of sword element. When Guhan brought Jiyu Yun to the examination room, Guhan asked her apologetically, "Xiaoyun, can you understand me?" Jiyu Yun must be very sad to have to do a blood test with Jiyu Yun, who had always thought that he was her good brother. "Of course, it's no big deal. Do you think I'll be happy if I live with you all day?" Unexpectedly, Jiyu Yun was very open-minded. She said word by word, "As long as I can be with Big Brother and prove that I'm really Big Brother's little sister, no matter what I do, I'll be very happy." Okay. Guhan suddenly felt that, in terms of character, Jiyu Yun was somewhat similar to him. They were both very rational. However, on the contrary, he was going further and further down the road of sensibility. The decisive Guhan from a month ago was already half gone. When Guhan carried Jiyu Yun to Song Fei's examination room, this unlucky girl was openly lying on the patient's bed, sleeping soundly. TSK, this was a serious violation of discipline. Once discovered, her salary would be deducted. "I'll go wake her up." Jiyu Yun was bored. After finding Song Fei sleeping, she immediately jumped out of Guhan's arms and onto Song Fei's bed. Then, she pinched Song Fei's nose. "Damn it, this is another fellow who is as worrisome as the poor." Guhan smiled bitterly and immediately carried Jiyu Yun off Song Fei's bed. However, it was too late. Song Fei, who was sleeping soundly, had already opened his hazy eyes. "Who is it? Are you off work?" Song Fei thought that his colleague was teasing him. However, when he opened his eyes, he saw that it was Guhan, whom he had not seen for a long time. Blushing, he immediately got up from the bed and tidied up his clothes. "Why are you here? Why are you here? There's something I need your help with." Guhan knocked on Jiyu Yun's head. "I'm sorry, my sister is a little too lively and woke you up." It's okay. I shouldn't have slept. I've been too free these days." Song Fei explained the reason why he was sleeping. Then, he said a few polite words to Guhan and asked, "What do you need me to help you with? Don't tell me you want me to test your sword element again." "No." Jiyu Han shook his head. "The reason I came to you today is to ask you to help me conduct a blood test with her." "What? You want to do a blood test?" Song Fei was shocked. She did not expect that Guhan was looking for her to do a blood test. "Didn't you say that this little girl is your sister? Why do you want to do a blood test?" Sigh. Guhan began to recite the lines that he had rehearsed with Jiyu Yun. "My sister disappeared 2 years ago. A few days ago, I suddenly found this girl who looks very similar to my sister. However, 2 years have passed, and her appearance has changed. So, I want to do a blood test to confirm it. I see. I didn't expect this little girl to be so pitiful. Song Ifei sighed. Go to the front desk and register. Come back to me after you've registered. Can you help me test it in private? Guhan's face looked even more miserable. You don't know this, but when I found my sister, her personal terminal had already disappeared. Without a personal terminal, you can't register. It'll be too troublesome if you make it up. Not only will you have to go through all kinds of checks, but you'll also have to wait for a few months. So, I hope to confirm this news as soon as possible. Personal terminal is missing? Song Ifei grabbed one of Ji Yun's hands and pinched near her wrist. Indeed, there was no hard feeling, and the personal terminal in Ji Yun's body had disappeared. Hey, brother, what you want me to do is illegal. If I get caught, I'll be in big trouble. No, I can't do this. Song Ifei waved her hands. She felt that she was not close enough to Guhan to help him do something that violated the rules. This situation was already within Guhan's expectations, and he had a way to persuade Song Ifei. However, before Guhan said anything, Ji Yun walked to Song Ifei's side and pulled her sleeve. Sister, I'm begging you, please help Xiaoyun. With that, Ji Yun squeezed out a few drops of sincere tears from her eyes. Song Ifei, who was already soft-hearted, was at a loss. Sister, you don't know. He's your beloved and respected brother. But because of this, he still doubts my identity. Although brother still treats Xiaoyun very well, Xiaoyun can't survive in this life full of doubts and estrangement. If this continues for a few more months, Xiaoyun will really go crazy. Sister, can you understand the feeling of being doubted by your family all the time? It feels like the whole world is doubting you. Sister, Xiaoyun really can't take it anymore. Do a good deed and help Xiaoyun. Let brother know if Xiaoyun is really his sister. Good sister, Xiaoyun will really go crazy these days. Song Ifei didn't know if Ji Yun was telling the truth, but Ji Yun's heartfelt and touching words had completely moved Song Ifei. She glared at Guhan fiercely, as if blaming Guhan for being so cruel to his sister. Then, she hugged Ji Yun and comforted her. Good sister, I promise you, I'll do the identification for you now. When Guhan hugged Ji Yun, the little girl secretly stuck out 2 fingers and put on a victorious posture to ask for credit from Guhan. Is this Ji Yun really a 4-year-old girl who has slept with me for 12 years? Guhan shuddered at Ji Yun's performance. It didn't look like the acting skills of a 4-year-old girl. She was clearly a 16-year-old fox. Here's the result. Don't doubt your sister anymore. She is your biological sister. I've never seen a brother like you. Song Ifei threw the report in front of Ji Yuhan. You're right. Guhan read it carefully and let out a long sigh of relief. Although he didn't understand all the data on the report, Guhan could still understand the final conclusion. It clearly said, testing human A is Guhan, testing human B is Ji Yun. Based on the analysis of 24 different genetic loci, the probability of testing human A and B being biological siblings is greater than 99. 99,999,999%. After reading the report, Guhan could finally confirm that Ji Yun was his biological sister. However, how Ji Yun was resurrected was indeed a worldwide puzzle. Guhan couldn't figure it out at all. Thank you, Ifei. Guhan bowed to Song Ifei to express his gratitude. Treat your sister well in the future. Don't let me know that you treat your sister badly. Also, remember to get a new terminal for Ji Yun as soon as possible. Otherwise, Ji Yun won't be able to do anything in the future. She can just stay at home, Song Ifei said non-stop. I will. Although Guhan said that he would, it was actually very difficult to get a new terminal for Ji Yun. According to the official records, Ji Yun had been dead for 12 years. Suddenly, she had to be given the identity of his sister. It would be strange if the officials did the formalities for this kind of thing. It might cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, Jiyu Han was a little reluctant to give Jiyu Yun a personal terminal. By the way, can I leave Jiyu Yun with you? I have to go to the Sword Garret later. I can't take care of her. Why are you going to the Sword Garret? Song Ifei was stunned for a moment. He immediately remembered that this guy's sword element had broken through 1,000 quarks more than a week ago. You are going to synchronize the Sword Lady of the Sword? Yes. Gu Han nodded. Then you don't have to go. The Sword Garret has been closed for a week. I heard that it will only reopen tomorrow morning at the earliest. Song Ifei spread his hands. Otherwise, why do you think I am so free here? It has been closed for a week. Why? Gu Han was shocked. The Sword Garret had been closed for more than a decade. I will tell you in secret. Don't tell anyone. Song Ifei looked around vigilantly. The wielder of the Yuchang sword, formless sword, died in battle. His ancient sword lady and famous sword lady have returned to the Sword Garret. Only the Yuchang sword, ranked second in the treasure sword record, has not returned. The people of the Sword Garret are going crazy trying to find her. Chapter 282. Non-Fei's sword's name was Bai Kai in Yuzhang City. It could be said that he was not a big or small celebrity. This could be seen from the fact that he was able to obtain an official title at the famous sword level. Unless he had established a special merit, the Sword Committee would only give him a title after he reached the Spirit Sword level. There had always been some dissatisfaction with the Non-Fei's sword's name, Bai Kai, because many people thought that his achievements and merits were only above average and did not deserve this title. There were hundreds of famous sword-level sword-bearers whose contributions were ahead of his, but none of them were recognized by the Sword Committee. Why could Bai Kai get this title? Most of the sword-bearers agreed that the reason why Bai Kai could get this title was because of his Yuchang sword. This was because the Yuchang sword was extremely popular in Yuzhang City. It was loved by countless people and was known as the mascot of Yuzhang City. Once someone synchronized the Yuchang sword, they would become the most attention-grabbing person in the entire city. Since ancient times, more than a dozen Yuchang sword-bearers had been like this. There were many reasons why Yuchang sword could have such a status in Yuzhang City. The most important reason was that Yuchang sword was the sword maiden of Kunzu's fleeting time calendar. In all the legends about Kunzu, there were traces of Yuchang sword. All the sword maidens used by Kunzu in the past had a feeling similar to sacred objects. It was like telling everyone that this spittoon was used by Jesus Christ. It was guaranteed that a lot of people would immediately kneel down in front of this spittoon to kiss and lick it, trying to taste God. It was a bit disgusting. Most of the sword maidens used by Kunzu were stored in the sword pavilion in Yangjing City. Only 2 sword maidens were left outside. One of them, the Yuchang sword, was left in the sword pavilion in Yuzhang City. It was said that on the 80th birthday of Zhetian Zhendi, the founder of Yuzhang City, the Lionian family and Yangjing City gave it to Zhetian Zhendi as a congratulatory gift. This was the consensus view of the people of Yuzhang City. The people of Yangjing City strongly opposed this, claiming that Yuzhang City stole it. The 2 cities fought over the ownership of Yuchang sword. In addition, Yuchang sword had made great contributions during several crises in Yuzhang City, so Yuchang sword became the mascot of Yuzhang City. Every year, it won the first place in the Sword Maiden contest, which was the favorite of the people of Yuzhang City. It was no wonder that after Bai Kai's Yuchang sword was successfully synchronized, it immediately attracted the attention of the people of Yuzhang City. It appeared on all the major news programs, guest interviews, Art Life, The Voice of Yuzhang, and so on. It became a big star in Yuzhang City. But now, this famous sword wielder was dead. It didn't matter how he died. People didn't care about how he died. But when the people of the Sword Pavilion found that Yuchang sword didn't return to the Sword Pavilion after Bai Kai's death, something big happened. Bai Kai's other 2 sword maidens, the Ancient Sword and the Famous Sword, returned to the Sword Pavilion. Only the Yuchang sword was completely missing. According to Song Ifei, all the staff of the Sword Garret and the sword-bearers of Yuzhang City were frantically looking for the Yuchang sword. They even closed the Sword Garret for a week, which was rare. Unfortunately, No one knew why Bai Kai went out of the city this time. Naturally, they didn't know where Bai Kai died. After a week of searching, they didn't even find a trace of Yu Chang's sword. Closing the sword pavilion for a week was the limit. If they didn't open it again, the sword bearers would probably tear the roof of the sword pavilion apart. Hearing such news from Song Yifei, Guhan felt more or less helpless. But compared to confirming that Ji Yu Yun was his sister, this helplessness was nothing. But today, Guhan's trip was not in vain. He went to the front desk to apply for synchronization, and then asked Song Yifei to do a sword element test. After getting approval for synchronization, he left the sword-bearers service center. In this way, when the sword pavilion opened the next day, Guhan could enter the sword pavilion early and didn't have to spend time on all kinds of procedures. At about 8 o'clock the next day, Guhan came to the sword-bearers service center, almost at the time when the sword pavilion opened. But probably because the sword pavilion was closed for a week, there were dozens of sword-bearers waiting in line at the entrance of the sword pavilion to enter the sword pavilion even though it was so early. They probably started to line up at 5 or 6 o'clock. If they waited in line, Guhan estimated that he could enter the sword pavilion at noon, which made Guhan very annoyed. "Hey, Guhan, you're so early." After waiting for 2 hours in silence, someone suddenly called out to Guhan. He turned his head and found that it was Song Yifei. Different from the Song Yifei in the white coat, today Song Yifei was wearing a pink lace dress. Song Yifei was actually a very beautiful girl. Oh, no, Song Yifei was almost 28 years old, so it was not appropriate to call her a girl. Hello. After all, Song Yifei had helped Guhan a lot, so Guhan couldn't give her a cold face, so he gave her a stiff smile. Hey, comrade Guhan, you don't look well, and your eyes are swollen. Didn't you sleep well last night? Song Yifei asked with concern. Haha. I had insomnia. Guhan continued to smile awkwardly. Of course, Guhan didn't have insomnia. He had never had insomnia in his life except for a whole year 12 years ago. But Guhan really didn't sleep well last night, because Qingpin and Ji Yu Yun fought on Guhan's bed. The two were very good friends at first, and they even watched cartoons together. But when it was lunchtime, the conflict inexplicably broke out. Because Ji Yu Yun repeatedly emphasized that she liked to eat fish, and Guhan gave Wen Maiyun enough RMB, Wen Maiyun bought more than a dozen big blue and white fishes. In Wen Maiyun's eyes, fish was also meat. Qingpin was such a cute guy who liked to eat meat, so he definitely wouldn't reject fish. So this time, Wen Maiyun didn't prepare pork dishes such as braised pork or dongpa pork. Instead, she simply sat on the table and ate an all-fish feast. For such a situation, Ji Yu Yun naturally clapped her hands happily and wolfed down the food. But Qingpin wasn't happy. After eating a few mouthfuls of fish in front of her, he threw his chopsticks and jumped on Guhan's body. He acted like a spoiled child, saying that fish was the worst. Qingpin didn't want to eat fish, and Qingpin wanted to eat pork. Guhan had just been saved by Qingpin, so he naturally went along with Qingpin. Qingpin was good in every way. More importantly, pork was much cheaper than fish. It was a good thing that Qingpin liked to eat pork. Saving money. So Guhan comforted Qingpin with a few words and belittled fish. Then, Ji Yu Yun became unhappy and directly quarreled with Qingpin. The two friends who were playing amicably just a moment ago began to fight on the spot. Ji Yu Yun also jumped into Guhan's arms and used Guhan's arms as a battlefield. She started a debate with Qingpin about which meat was better, pork or fish. Qingpin, a creature who lived by acting cute, was no match for Ji Yu Yun at all. He didn't know where Ji Yu Yun learned how to debate with a sharp tongue. The entire debate was controlled by her mouth, and Qingpin was at a disadvantage. The adorable Qingpin was rendered speechless by Ji Yu Yun's machine gun-like lines. He retreated step by step. In the end, he could only bury himself in Guhan's arms and complain to Guhan about Ji Yu Yun's various crimes. Faced with this situation, Guhan decisively decided to lock himself in the training room. The reason was very noble. All the meridians in his body had been destroyed, and he needed to cultivate all over again to open up his meridians. In the end, Guhan cultivated until almost 12 o'clock in the evening. Guhan was pleasantly surprised to find that the speed of cultivation was much faster than he had imagined. In the past, it would have taken him half a month or even 2 or 3 months to open up a meridian. Now, it only took him less than 2 hours to open up all the meridians. This was something that Ji Han could not understand. Even if he already had the experience of cultivation, the meridians were still brand new meridians. They were filled with all kinds of obstacles and obscure areas. He needed to slowly carve them out bit by bit, as if he was a lazy worker. But now, once Guhan's sword essence arrived, these meridians were naturally opened up without any obstacles. After a few repetitions, the meridians returned to the standard before the reconstruction. It was as if Guhan hadn't been injured at all. Guhan didn't have any good explanation for this, but there was no doubt that this was a good thing. The 9 swords of mysterious heaven that he had estimated would take 1 or 2 years to return would probably only need half a month to completely recover. This was really a good thing. Faced with such a good thing, Guhan naturally continued to cultivate in one go. When his stomach was growling from hunger, he had no choice but to come out of the training room. Only then did he realize that it was already 12 o'clock in the evening. Then, he conveniently discovered that his house was already in a mess. He didn't know how intense the fight between Ji Yun and Qing Pin was. In short, when Ma Yun would need at least a day to clean up the entire house and return it to its original state. This didn't include the time to buy the various furniture and decorations that had been damaged by the two of them. At this time, Guhan realized that he couldn't let the two of them continue to fight, or his house would be torn down. So, Guhan pressed Ji Yun and Qing Pin on his bed, one on each side, and Guhan lay in the middle. He planned to use his dignity to force the two of them to sleep quietly. Otherwise, the two of them would fight in the house until dawn the next day. Of course, the ending was tragic. Guhan completely discovered that he had no dignity at all in front of Ji Yun and Qing Pin. Although the two of them didn't fight all over the house, they fought one battle after another with Guhan's chest as the battlefield. It wasn't until about 6 o'clock the next morning that the two of them were completely exhausted and fell asleep together. Ji Yun and Qing Pin didn't care. They could sleep as long as they wanted, but Guhan was miserable. He had to go to the sword pavilion at 8 o'clock, so he slept for less than an hour. This was also the reason why Song Yifei noticed Guhan's dark circles. Chapter 283. Miss Yifei, why are you here? Shouldn't you be at work now? Guhan glanced at Song Yifei, who was dressed up nicely. Not only was she not at work, she was not even wearing a white coat. I took the day off today. Song Yifei rolled her eyes at Guhan. As for why I'm here, it's because my sword element is already at 1,950 quarks. I'm here for synchronization. Is that so? Congratulations. Guhan did not expect Song Yifei to be here for synchronization as well. This child was too pitiful. She already had 1,950 quarks of sword element. Who knew how many synchronization experiments she had done, but she still had not become an ancient sword wielder. Song Yifei was a genius model girl with 1,700 plus innate sword element. But I seem to have woken up late today. Aren't there a little too many people today? Song Yifei rubbed her head in embarrassment. I can't help it. Once I thought about it being my day off today, I couldn't help but stay in bed. Song Yifei was indeed late. At this moment, there were less than 15 people in front of Guhan, while those behind Guhan had already made a turn. It was estimated that there were at least 50 people. If Song Yifei had to wait at the end of the line, she would have to wait until the afternoon before it would be her turn. You stand here. Guhan took a step back and vacated a spot in front of him. Song Yifei. Don't get me wrong. Guhan was not trying to please Song Yifei. He just wanted to return her a favor. This is not good. Seeing the spot that Guhan vacated, Song Yifei was a little hesitant. This was blatantly cutting the line. She would be scolded. Up to you. If you want to wait until the afternoon. Guhan's words made Song Yifei lose her sense of shame. She lowered her head and scurried in front of Guhan, cutting the line. The people at the end of the line might not have seen Song Yifei's actions, but the people behind Guhan saw it clearly. They were instantly indignant. F***ck, do you have any manners? What right do you have to cut the line? You're such a coward. That person immediately started scolding. Mother **k, yuan percent at and asterisk. Come out, I'll beat you to death. This person brandished his fists, ready to fight. Young man, don't be too arrogant. Ask your girlfriend to go back. You have to queue up if you're late. Didn't your mother teach you the traditional virtues of the Chinese people? This guy's words are kind of harmonious, but the word girlfriend is confirmed. Song Yifei blushed and lowered her head. She pulled Guhan's sleeve and whispered, Guhan, maybe I should go to the back of the line. No need. Ji Yuhan patted Song Yifei's hand and said expressionlessly to the people who were cheering the loudest, 10,000 yuan per person. 10,000 per person? What do you mean? These people looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't understand what Guhan meant, 10,000 yuan per person. I'll buy it for you to shut up. Ji Yuhan coldly added. When these people heard that they could earn 10,000 for free, they immediately shut their mouths. They did not say anything else and all revealed bright smiles. Don't think that these people are greedy. If someone offered you 10,000 yuan to buy a spot to jump the queue when you were in the queue, you would also give way. Not to mention 10,000 yuan, even if it was 100 yuan, you would still give way. Who the F***ck wouldn't want money? Of course, it was also because these people were not sword holders, at least not now. They were just civilians waiting to be coordinated, and they were still very short of money. If they were all sword bearers, they wouldn't have given in just for $10,000. On the contrary, they would have thrown $100,000 at Ji Yuhan's head and told him to scram. This was a matter of face, and if it got out of hand, it could cost someone's life. Hey, do you have to be so rich? It's 10,000 yuan. Song Yifei's eyes sparkled. Her monthly salary was only 3,000 yuan, which was really too rich. You like it? Then I'll give you 10,000 yuan too, Guhan suddenly said. Faced with such a temptation, Song Yifei struggled a few times, but in the end, she shook her head and declined Guhan's 10,000 yuan. It was not that she was trying to save face, but she felt that if she accepted the 10,000 yuan, her relationship with Guhan would become that of a sole exchange of benefits. After this, Guhan and Song Yifei entered a period of relative silence. Song Yifei was afraid that if she talked too much with Guhan, the people behind her would really think that she was Guhan's girlfriend. On the other hand, Guhan was silent because he did not want to talk to Song Yifei at all. After waiting in line quietly for a while, it was finally Song Yifei's turn in front of Guhan. The staff in charge of registration at the door was probably familiar with Song Yifei. When they saw her, they immediately teased her. Hey, isn't this our Princess Yifei? Have you reached 1,950 quarks so quickly? These people were so familiar with Song Yifei that they knew exactly how many sword elements Song Yifei synchronized with every time she came. Phut, I don't want to talk to you. You always make me angry. Song Yifei rolled her eyes at the staff in charge of registration, then leaned over to the staff and whispered in his ear, Well, did you find Lady Yu Chang? Don't mention it. Hearing this question, the staff looked like he had eaten **tea. We found Baichi's body. I'll tell you in secret, but don't tell anyone else. We're so embarrassed this time. The staff looked around vigilantly, then whispered to Song Yifei, At first, we thought Baikai died outside, but we found out that he died in Yuzhong City, in a brothel, and died immediately. I didn't expect him to be such a person. He said on TV that he only loved his wife, but he turned out to be such a person. That's not right. If he died in Yuzhong City, it's even more impossible for Lady Yu Chang to be lost. Song Yifei was puzzled. If Baikai died immediately, then he was not attacked by Yuan Ku, and naturally, Yuan Ku would not have stopped Lady Yu Chang from returning to the sword garret. Song Yifei had always guessed that Baikai met the powerful Yuan Ku and died in battle, causing Lady Yu Chang to be stopped by Yuan Ku, or simply broken into pieces. That was why she could not come back. That's why our master was so angry. He was still cursing people this morning, cursing all of Baichi's ancestors. However, we suspect that someone might have secretly killed Baikai. Because Baiche's personal terminal disappeared, and because personal terminals record everything before the owner died, the murderer took away his personal terminal to avoid exposing his identity. We are investigating the sword-bearers who had conflicts with Bai Kai. According to preliminary statistics, there are hundreds of people, and we are investigating them one by one. The staff explained everything, then stamped a stamp on Song Ifei's application form and let him in. These two people thought that they were whispering, and no one could hear them clearly, but they did not know that Guhan heard them. Those who practiced martial arts had extremely good hearing, and with the help of the Sword Maiden, it was even more so. Even if they lowered their voices by 5 times, Ji Han would still be able to hear them clearly. Unexpectedly, the Yuchang sword seemed to be involved in such a mystery. If Guhan was involved, he might be able to make a guest appearance and write a story called Detective Guhan. Well, of course, that was impossible. Guhan was absolutely not interested in these troublesome things. Next, when a person with a gloomy face, who probably had failed synchronization, walked out of the sword garret, the staff shouted and saw the application form handed over by Guhan. Oh, it's an ancient sword bearer. The staff was shocked, and his attitude toward Guhan changed from casual to respectful. After all, he was just an ordinary person. Although he worked in the sword garret, the most important department of the sword bearer's service center, he was still an ordinary person. Facing a sword bearer, he had to be respectful. Sir, why are you waiting in line? The staff stamped the application form and asked confusedly. You are an ancient sword bearer, so you can go in directly. There is no need to wait in line. According to the sword garret's rules, sword bearers who were ancient sword bearers or above could directly enter the sword garret without waiting in line if they wanted to increase their level and coordinate with the sword lady again. However, Guhan could not be blamed. Many new sword bearers did not know about this. Like Guhan, they had waited in line for a long time before they knew they had this privilege. Oh, I'll remember it next time. There was no expression on Ji Han's face, which made the staff members who were expecting to see Ji Han's constipated expression very disappointed. They did not have much entertainment when they were working, but when they saw the new swordsman's constipated expression after knowing that he did not have to queue up, they got some wicked pleasure. Sir Guhan, the sword inscription ceremony for ancient sword bearers is in the small room on the left of the sword garret. Do not go the wrong way. Thank you. Guhan walked into the sword garret, and saw Song Ifei receiving the potion of the medicinal sword on the altar where Guhan had once been. Guhan suddenly remembered that he had seen Liuyan Ling receiving the potion of the medicinal sword. It had been so many days, and he wondered how Liuyan Ling was doing. Young master, Miss Liuyan, we can confirm that the target is in this mountain. Fleeting Time Ling and Shu Tianyuan stood side by side on a large, barren rock. Opposite them was an old swordsman who was reporting the latest news. Our sword ladies have activated Heaven's perception, and we can confirm that there is a strong but weak reaction of sword essence within the mountain. We can confirm that the target is about to awaken. Chapter 284. The ancient sword inscription ceremony was actually similar to the mortal sword inscription ceremony. The biggest difference was probably the materials used in the ancient sword inscription ceremony. Ji Han could feel the medicinal power of the ancient sword inscription ceremony, which was much stronger than the last time, entering his body and increasing his abilities. After the ceremony, Guhan went straight to the second floor of the sword tower from the entrance reserved for ancient sword bearers. The first floor was filled with ancient sword maidens, while the second floor was filled with treasured sword maidens. Welcome, Lord Guhan. Please follow me. A guide with a formal smile led Guhan to the second floor. Although they had thick makeup on, it could be seen that even the heavy makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under their eyes. Their smiles couldn't be any more forced. It seemed like this lady hadn't been sleeping well for the past few days. Yuzhang City's sword tower has a total of 358 natural sword maidens and 1698 artificial sword maidens. Among them, 187 natural sword maidens have already been sent away. The remaining 171 natural sword maidens are still in the sword tower, waiting for their sword bearers. The guide introduced the basic situation of the sword tower's second floor in a formal manner. As far as Guhan knew, there were a total of 3,216 natural sword maidens. Including artificial sword maidens, Yuzhong City had only collected 2,056. There were more than 1,000 that weren't here. He didn't know if it was because there weren't any artificial replicas, or because Yangjing City was so stingy that they didn't provide templates. Without templates, even the best swordsmiths couldn't replicate the artificial sword maidens. From this, it could be seen how much conflict there was between Yangjing City and Yuzhong City. Although our Yuzhong Sword Tower only ranks third among the 8 base cities in terms of the number of natural sword ladies, we have 3 natural sword ladies who are ranked in the top 3 of the natural sword ladies. This is something that even Yangjing City is jealous of. At this point, the guide began to feel proud. Obviously, she felt deeply honored that her city's sword tower was superior to Yangjing City's. The entire Yuzhong City was almost like this. As long as they could surpass Yangjing City, even by a small margin, the people of Yuzhong City would feel honored and honored. It was like hearing that a certain industry or a certain technology in China surpassed America 1,000 years ago. It was almost the same thing. But to be honest, it was indeed a unique feat to gather all the top 3 sword ladies in one sword pavilion. Not even the Yangjin base city, which was rich and powerful, could achieve such a feat. The 3 natural sword maidens that the guide mentioned were the number 1 sword maidens, Heaven Reliant Sword, number 2 sword maidens, and number 3 sword maidens, Tianwen Sword. Tianwen Sword had already been taken away by Liunian Ling, and the Yuchang Sword had gone missing. The only sword left in the sword tower was the number 1 sword, Heaven Reliant Sword. Lord Guhan, what you're looking at now is a sword maiden of the treasure grade, the Mountain Suppression Sword. He led the girl to a counter where a sword maiden was kept. He pointed at a heavy sword in a brocade box and said, "The Mountain Suppression Sword is ranked 545th in the treasure sword record. It was the sword of Liu Chan, the second emperor of Shu Han during the Three Kingdoms era. She actually has a powerful defense and can defend against a large amount of damage from a frontal attack. She's a sword maiden with a very powerful life-saving ability." Guhan noticed that there were 2 grooves in the brocade box, 1 gold and 1 silver, for sword maidens. 2 identical sword maidens were placed in the 2 grooves. Guhan knew that this meant that the natural sword maidens and artificial sword maidens of the Mountain Suppression Sword were stored in the sword tower and hadn't been taken away. When he first saw the Mountain Suppression Sword, Guhan's heart surged with a very strong urge to want her. This wasn't the first time Guhan had experienced this feeling. The last time he came to the sword tower, Guhan had been tortured by this kind of sword affinity. Almost all of the ancient sword maidens had sensed a sword affinity with Guhan, and it was a very strong sword affinity. Guhan could probably close his eyes and casually take out an ancient sword maiden and successfully synchronize with it. If it wasn't for Liunian Ling suddenly jumping out to synchronize with the Yixian sword and bringing Guhan into the sword burial grounds, he probably wouldn't have been able to withstand this strong sword affinity and would have had to find a strong sword maiden to synchronize with. Naturally, there wouldn't have been a cute guy like Qingpin. In the end, Guhan still had to thank Liunian Ling. Without Liunian Ling, Guhan wouldn't have been able to obtain Qingpin. Along the way, they passed by more than 10 counters with treasured sword maidens. The female guide was trying her best to promote the advantages of these sword maidens to Guhan. She planned to make Guhan fail as soon as possible so that he would be kicked out of the sword tower. They had received news that the number of people waiting outside to synchronize with the sword maidens had already exceeded 100. They had to speed up the synchronization experiment in the sword tower, or else they would have to work overtime until 11 p.m. However, Guhan's attention wasn't on these sword maidens who were ranked in the hundreds or even the thousands. This was because Guhan's goal in coming here was very clear. He was here for the number 1 treasured sword, the Heavenly Sword. Since he had already synchronized with the sword maidens in the game, he would definitely be able to do it in reality as well. In fact, more than half of the treasured sword maidens along the way had a strong sword affinity with Guhan. Although it was much lower than the ratio of all the ancient sword maidens, it was still a very terrifying thing. This meant that more than half of the treasured sword maidens had acknowledged Guhan and had taken the initiative to invite Guhan to become their sword wielder. If half of the treasured sword maidens had acknowledged Guhan, would Heavenly Sword still be able to escape? Alright, don't waste time on these sword maidens. Just tell me where the Heavenly Sword is. Guhan interrupted the guide, who was talking non-stop about an artificial sword maiden, and asked bluntly. TSK, another kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. One look and I can tell that he's a newbie who has just reached 1,000 quarks. The guide secretly despised Guhan, then replied with a smile, Lord Guhan, you might not know this, but our swordsmiths are unable to replicate the artificial sword maidens of the Heavenly Sword. Even now, the template for the Heavenly Sword has not been analyzed. Our sword tower doesn't have any artificial sword maidens for the Heavenly Sword. What does this have to do with artificial sword maidens? Guhan frowned. I don't need artificial sword maidens. I only need natural sword maidens. Could the Heavenly Sword have already been synchronized and taken away? How could that be? Of course not. The guide covered her mouth and laughed. The Heavenly Sword hasn't been synchronized and taken out for more than 300 years. I believe that even after a few hundred years, no one will be able to take the Heavenly Sword away. The guide's words were completely ridiculing Guhan, saying that he was dreaming. It was no wonder that the guide felt this way, because the Heavenly Sword was indeed a sword maiden that was very difficult to serve. From the first time she was born until now, she had only met 2 sword bearers in real life, and it was said that her relationship with both sword bearers was terrible. The last sword wielder became a powerful immortal sword wielder in the end. After that sword bearer obtained the spirit sword maiden, he completely shelved the Heavenly Sword. He never used the Heavenly Sword even once in his life until his death. After that sword bearer, the Heavenly Sword seemed to have completely given up on humans. No matter how many people came to it to synchronize and take care of it, it did not respond at all. For more than 350 years, the Heavenly Sword had rejected over 50,000 ancient sword-bearers' requests to synchronize and take care of it. Just bring me there. What's with all this nonsense? Guhan glared at the guide, and his tone became very rude. Faced with Guhan's domineering attitude, the guide began to curse in her heart, but she still maintained a smile on her face. All right, please follow me, Lord Guhan. This is your right. After following the guide for a while, Guhan finally arrived at the place where the Heavenly Sword was kept. It was a separate hall, with 3 walls in front, left, and right, each with a counter. These 3 counters were probably where the Heavenly Sword, the Fishbowl Sword, and the Heaven Inquiring Sword were kept. Sure enough, Ji Yuhan glanced at the nameplates on the counters. They were the names of the 3 ancient sword maidens. However, 2 of the brocade boxes on the counters were already empty. There was nothing inside. Only the Heavenly Sword's brocade box had a sharp longsword in it. Naturally, Guhan was very familiar with the sword. After all, Guhan had already played with it in the game. Lord Guhan, as your guide, I must remind you that you must carefully consider whether or not you wish to synchronize with the Heavenly Sword. The guide tried to persuade him one last time. Sir Ji Yuhan, I know you are a genius, but no matter how talented you are, you will still be defeated by the Heavenly Sword. Let me give you some data. Based on our records over the past 300 years, in terms of bloodline, more than 5,000 descendants of the Sword Emperor aristocratic clan have been defeated by the Heavenly Sword. Among all the aristocratic clans, the Lionian aristocratic clan, which has the best bloodline, every generation's direct descendant would come here to try to synchronize with the Heavenly Sword. However, without exception, they all failed. Just over 10 days ago, the new descendant of the Lionian aristocratic clan also came here, but he also failed. In terms of talent, of the 50,000 people who have failed to synchronize with the Heavenly Sword, 30,000 of them have successfully become treasured swordbearers, 10,000 have become famed swordbearers, and 1,000 have become spiritual swordbearers. Of these 1,000, 86 sword immortals and 5 Gendi were born. When His Majesty Gendi was still an ancient swordbearer, he also came here. Of course, he also failed. Lord Guhan, do you think that your bloodline and talent can compare to that of the Lionian family and Gendi? Lord Guhan, please do not waste the precious resources of the ancient sword inscription ceremony. You should try it with the other sword maidens. The guide finally finished her advice. Well said, but I stand by my choice. Forget it, the guide's long speech was wasted. Chapter 285. As You Wish. The guide's eyes were like those of a dead fish. She was probably angered by Guhan. She extended a hand in front of Guhan and said, "Come, give it to me." "What is it?" Guhan frowned. What was wrong with this guide? Was she openly asking for a bribe? Of course it's the hero coin. Lord Guhan, don't tell me you want to synchronize the heavenly sword without knowing anything. The guide smiled disdainfully. Lord, it seems like you don't know that a top innate sword lady like Heavenly Sword, who is ranked in the top 500, can't be synchronized just because she wants to. If you want to synchronize with Lady Heavenly Reliance, Lord Gu Han, you'll have to give Sword Tower 10,000 hero coins. If you don't have them, you'll have to choose another option. Not everyone can synchronize with Lady Heavenly Reliance, the guide said in a strange tone. Only then did Guhan remember that Sword Pavilion did have such a rule. Because synchronizing with Heavenly Sword Lady would consume a certain amount of origin energy, Sword Pavilion strictly controlled the number of times they could synchronize with Heavenly Sword Lady and set a limit of 3 times a day. There was also a rule that stated that Sword Pavilion had to hand over a sufficient amount of hero coins to conduct a synchronization experiment with a top-class sword maiden. This was to put an end to the ancient sword tier swordbearers who thought that they should just test Heavenly Sword's synchronization experiment with Heavenly Sword. Sword Pavilion naturally didn't care about normal RMB. Only hero coins could catch their attention. According to the ranking of the innate sword lady, the price of synchronizing with them was naturally different. For example, the top Heavenly Sword Lady required 10,000 hero coins. Guhan had only earned a little over 50 hero coins after completing 5 quests in the Myling mountain range with his life on the line. A normal ancient sword wielder would need around 3 to 4 years to save up such a huge sum of money if they fought for 250 hero coins a month. With such a huge amount of time, every ancient sword wielder who wanted to experiment with Heavenly Sword Lady would have to carefully weigh their own worth. Was it worth it to spend such a huge amount of money for a hope that wouldn't appear in the next 350 years? However, reducing Goddess Yi's energy consumption was only the official reason. According to some conspiracy theorists, the synchronization of the Sword Maiden did not require any energy at all. The reason why the game developers wanted to collect so many hero coins was because the number of hero coins released far exceeded the number of hero coins collected. In order to prevent the inflation of hero coins, they used this channel to collect hero coins. Lord Guhan, if you haven't prepared the hero coin by today, then please come back here after you have. The guide was also a bad person. He didn't remind Guhan about the hero coin in the beginning. Now that he was here, he suddenly asked Guhan for the hero coin. It was obvious that he was waiting to see Guhan make a fool of himself. Sigh, this world is really malicious. Even a random small character wants to provoke Guhan. I don't have a hero coin, Guhan replied calmly. The guide looked as if she had already guessed that Guhan didn't have one. She smiled from the bottom of her heart since she met Guhan. Don't worry, Lord Guhan. I can even show you around the other sword maidens. As long as the sword maidens are ranked below 500, they don't accept hero coins. I don't need those sword maidens. I only want the heavenly sword. Guhan's dry words made the guide a little angry. She didn't even want to smile anymore. She looked at Guhan with disdain. Lord, if you have a hero coin, just give it to me. Don't make things difficult for people like us who rely on our salaries. As long as you take out the hero coin, you can touch Goddess Yi. I said, I don't have a hero coin, Guhan said seriously. I never lie. If I say I don't have one, I don't have one. Then please leave, Lord. Otherwise, I'll have to call the guards of the Sword Garret to receive Lord Guhan. The guards of the Sword Garret that the guide mentioned were the sword bearers in charge of guarding the Sword Garret. According to the rules, the Sword Garret needed at least 1 immortal sword bearer, 3 spiritual sword bearers, 50 famed sword bearers, and more than 100 sword and ancient sword-bearers to provide comprehensive protection. I have a question. Guhan walked to the counter of the heavenly sword. I only need to touch the synchronization. Are you sure the guards of the sword garret will be able to get here before I touch the heavenly sword? You dare. The guide's expression changed. She had worked here for more than 10 years. She had never seen a sword bearer like Guhan trying to forcefully synchronize with the sword maidens. Guards. Sword garret guards. Worker 154 is calling the guards. Someone is forcefully synchronizing with the heavenly sword. Someone is forcefully synchronizing with the heavenly sword. Please come and stop him. The guards reacted quickly. After receiving the guide's report, the first wave of sword bearers arrived at the heavenly sword's location in less than 10 seconds. However, they were still too late. They looked at the scene in front of them in confusion, not knowing what to do. What do we do, boss? The first 2 sword bearers to arrive were of the ancient sword rank and the treasured sword rank. The ancient sword rank sword-bearer asked his leader, the treasured sword rank sword-bearer, blankly. The treasured sword rank sword-bearer did not know how to answer. What's wrong? What happened? What are you two doing here? Go and capture him. At this moment, a famed sword rank guard rushed over and anxiously ordered the first 2 sword-bearers to capture him. As a result, the treasured sword rank team leader immediately ran to the famed sword rank side as if he had been granted amnesty. With a bitter face, he said, "Master, you're here. What do you think we should do?" Of course. The famed sword rank sword bearer wanted to say capture him, but when he saw what was happening in the hall, he was instantly dumbfounded. He could not bring himself to say the word capture. In the end, he could only take out his personal terminal and call his leader. As a result, the 2 spirit sword rank sword bearers rushed over. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were also dumbfounded and could not believe their eyes. However, they were spirit sword rank sword bearers and belonged to the upper echelons of the sword garret. They had considerable autonomy and could not ask Pavilion Master Liu Lei for help. The 2 spirit sword rank sword bearers looked at each other and said, "What are you panicking for? Haven't you seen synchronization before?" The 2 leaders first reprimanded the rest of the sword bearers and then immediately ordered, "Surround the city and protect this person. Absolutely do not allow anyone to touch his body." Who's that? What's going on? Why is there such a big commotion? Why do we have to coordinate with this comrade? Who's his guide? Come out and answer my questions. The spirit sword rank sword bearer shouted. Thus, Guhan's guide walked out trembling with fear. She did not expect things to turn out like this. Tell me, what's going on? Tell me everything. The spirit sword rank sword bearer stared at Guhan's guide with a serious and terrifying expression. At the same time, because of such a huge commotion, all the guides and a few ancient sword rank sword bearers on the 2nd floor gathered around to watch the show. I don't know either. Guhan's guide had a bitter look on her face. He said he wanted to coordinate with Lady Yi, so I brought him here. I asked him for a hero coin, but he refused to give it to me. He said he didn't have any. I asked him to leave this place. In the end, he didn't listen and said he wanted to forcefully coordinate with him. I'm just an ordinary person, so how could I stop him? I could only call you guys. You mean to say that this person didn't pay and forcefully held onto Heavenly Sword and began to coordinate with him? After hearing the guide's words, the spirit sword rank sword bearer had a strange look on his face. He suddenly didn't know how to deal with this guy. Logically speaking, this kind of person who didn't follow the rules and forcefully coordinated with him should be sent to the disciplinary committee and locked up for a year or 2 to let him know that rules were meant to be followed. In particular, the rules of Sword Pavilion required him to pay a terrible price. However, the method mentioned above was a punishment that would be carried out when the other party's synchronization and coordination failed. When the synchronization and coordination of the solid and cold was successful, the person would turn into a petrified state and begin to nurture the heavenly sword. This was a completely different matter. Were they going to lock up a heavenly sword wielder who had never appeared in 350 years in prison for 1 or 2 years? This was a complete waste of Heavenly Sword's fighting strength and also a complete joke for Yangjing City. After thinking about it again and again, the spirit sword rank sword-bearer made a wise decision. Everyone, stay here and protect him. I'm going to report to the pavilion master and let him deal with this matter. Sure enough, when faced with this kind of thing that one couldn't decide or didn't know how to decide, people's instinct was to push the blame to the person above them. Thereupon, a funny thing happened. These sword-bearers who originally came to capture Guhan instantly changed their identity and became Guhan's protectors. They surrounded the entire hall of Heavenly Sword, not allowing anyone to approach. Although the sword-wielding guards tried their best to cover up the scene in the hall, anyone with a bit of brains and good eyesight would be able to catch a glimpse of a stone-like figure standing alone in the hall of the Heaven-reliant sword. At the same time, his belly seemed to be gradually getting bigger. Yuchang's sword had long been synchronized with non-phase sword, except for the people of Sword Pavilion. Most people didn't know the news of Yuchang's sword's disappearance. It was said that Tianwen's sword was also taken away by a new sword-bearer a few days ago. As a result, it wasn't difficult for the remaining people to guess that the synchronized sword was the only one left in the hall, Heavenly Sword. In almost 10 minutes, the news about the Heavenly Sword, which hadn't awakened for 350 years, being synchronized with the first sword of Sword Maiden, Heavenly Sword, spread throughout Yuzhang City and then to Yangjing City, London City, and other base cities. Simply put, Guhan was about to become famous in the real world. Chapter 286. A few minutes later, Liu Lei, who was playing an indescribable game called Pulling Radish with his Sword Maiden, hurried over to the hall. After receiving the news that the synchronization of the Heavenly Sword was successful, he had no choice but to put down what he was doing and come here to deal with these trivial matters. You too, you're getting more and more backward. Do you need this old man's old bones to personally deal with such a small matter? Can't you make your own decisions? When Liu Lei saw them, he immediately lectured the two spirit sword grade sword-bearers. These two spirit sword-bearers, who were usually under a few people and enjoyed all kinds of respect, lowered their heads and let Liu Lei scold them. There was nothing they could do. The other party's ability was higher than theirs, and they were also older than them, so they could only accept it. TSK, if you think we can handle it, why did you come here in person? You could have just stayed at home and given full authority to the two of us. The two spirit sword-bearers thought to themselves, but their faces became more and more ashamed. All right, this matter can't be blamed on you. This old man has lived for so long, and I've never encountered such a thing. Liu Lei was satisfied with his scolding, so he gave these two unlucky guys a way out. This is the guy who forcefully synchronized with the Heavenly Sword. He's got guts to bully our Sword Pavilion. Just watch, even if he synchronized with the Heavenly Sword, I'll make him reflect for a few months in the disciplinary committee. I'll tell everyone that the rules of our Sword Pavilion can't be violated by just anyone. If you commit a crime, you have to pay the price. Old man Liu Lei ruthlessly reprimanded Guhan. Unfortunately, Guhan was like a rock at this time, so he couldn't hear Liu Lei's scolding at all. Oh, this belly looks like it's almost 8 months pregnant. It'll be born in a minute or so. According to the rules, when a sword-bearer synchronized, unless it was an emergency, no one was allowed to get within 5 meters of their body to avoid dangerous situations. However, old man Liu Lei didn't care about this at all. He casually walked to Guhan's side and very wretchedly touched Guhan's belly. He came to the conclusion that Guhan was nearly 8 months pregnant. Hey, why does this kid look so familiar? Heavenly Sword Immortal Liu Lei glanced at Guhan, and he couldn't take his eyes off him. Why does this guy look so familiar? I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. Hey, let me ask you, what's the name of this sword wielder? Liu Lei looked at the guide beside him. As soon as the guide heard Liu Lei's question, he tensed up as if there was a spring in his body. Pavilion Master, this sword wielder is called Guhan. He is an ancient sword wielder, and this is his first time coming to the 2nd floor to synchronize swords. The guide blurted out everything he knew. Guhan, it's really him. When he heard Guhan's name, Liu Lei's memories immediately resurfaced. After all, this had happened less than a month ago. Liu Lei remembered that this kid had followed him into the sword burial grounds with Liu Ling. Not only had he obtained the ancient sword Maiden Qingpin sword, which he had never heard of before, but he had also saved Liuyan Ling's life and gained the friendship of the Liuyan family. Liu Lei had thought that Guhan was a very lucky person to have saved Liuyan Ling's life and gained the favor of the Liuyan family. He hadn't expected that this guy's luck was not just a little bit. He had actually synchronized with the heaven-reliant sword, which had not moved for 350 years. This guy's luck was probably off the charts. No, wait, this child became an ancient sword wielder a month ago. This thought suddenly flashed through Liu Lei's mind. This time, he was even more surprised. It was not that there were no sword wielder who could advance from ancient sword to treasured sword in a month. In fact, it was not even considered rare. The children of the aristocratic families usually needed half a month to 20 days to reach the standard of 1,000 quarks to become a treasured sword wielder. Even Liuyan Ling had advanced from an ancient sword to a treasured sword in a mere 3 days. However, these fast people were all children of aristocratic families. Not only did they have a bloodline that allowed them to synchronize easily with the Sword Maiden, but they also had a large amount of resources from their families. They had been nurtured by their retainers since they were young, and they had begun all kinds of sword wielder combat training. This was why they were able to advance so quickly. However, Guhan was different. Liu Lei took a look at Guhan's information after that. He was a standard commoner's son, a phoenix boy, and an orphan whose parents had passed away. Although children who grew up in such an environment had good willpower, their hardware was terrible. Without half a year to a year, it was impossible for them to accumulate a treasured sword. Not to mention anything else, just not running away in fear when fighting with Yuan Ku for the first time was already a very good person. However, this Guhan could accomplish all of this in a month. What did this mean? It meant that not only was Guhan strong-willed, but he was also very talented. He was good at commanding his sword maiden to fight. This was because if he wanted to reach 1,000 quarks of sword essence in a month, he would have to go through a lot of battles. If he fought with the mouse-tier Yuan Ku, then he would need about 500 battles to reach 1,000 quarks. This was equivalent to killing 18 mouse-tier Yuan Ku every day. This was simply impossible. Therefore, this little guy, Guhan, would definitely fight with the tiger-tier Yuan Ku. In this case, he would only need about 100 battles to achieve his goal, killing an average of 3 to 4 Yuan Ku every day. However, it was impossible for Guhan to fight for the entire month. At least half of his time would be spent on preparation and learning. Putting everything else aside, Yuzhong University alone would never allow a new swordsman to leave the city to fight with Yuan Ku and seize the sword essence before completing basic combat training. Therefore, during the days when Guhan was actually fighting, he would have to kill 7 or 8 tiger-tier Yuan Ku every day in order to accumulate 1,000 quarks of sword essence. However, could this little guy named Guhan really do this? With the help of his Qingpin, which was originally used by Kunzu's grandmother to dance in the square, how could he do something as heaven-defying as killing 7 or 8 tiger-tier Yuan Ku every day? What kind of joke was this? Not even the Yixian sword could do this. Thinking of the Yixian sword, Liu Lei immediately thought of Liuyan Ling. At the same time, he also thought of the sword skill duel between Guhan and the Yixian, and how he had saved Liuyan Ling from the hands of the Yixian. At that time, Liu Lei had jokingly pushed Guhan over to take the bullet for Liuyan Ling, creating a chance for Guhan to save the damsel in distress. However, in reality, Liu Lei had just been talking about youth craziness and wanted to find some fun for himself. At that time, Liu Lei had already thought it through. If Liuyan Ling was really in danger, he would definitely save her. It was impossible that an immortal sword wielder could not save someone from an ancient sword wielder, right? However, later on, Liu Lei realized that the script did not play out according to his expectations. Guhan had actually saved Liuyan Ling, and the speed at which Guhan had learned the 5 fleeting times had truly shocked Liu Lei. At that time, Liu Lei had a very deep impression of Guhan's talent. In summary, Liu Lei judged that Guhan was a person with an extremely strong will who could withstand high-intensity battles day after day. At the same time, Guhan was extremely talented, and could even become a genius sword master. Towards such a genius, Liu Lei's thoughts gradually changed. He had originally planned to wait for Guhan to complete his synchronization before sending him to the discipline committee. However, Liu Lei decided to observe him for a while longer. When Liu Lei went through these thoughts in his head, Guhan's belly, which had not moved all this time, began to glow. Everyone present knew very well that Lady Heavenly Sword was about to be born from Guhan's purple palace. Indeed, very soon, a baby floated out of Guhan's purple palace. Then, in a second, it completed its growth and turned into a heroine in her 20s. She wore a calabash headdress on her head, and she appeared lazily in front of everyone. "Ah, I haven't seen sunlight in a long time." The first thing Heavenly Sword did after coming out was to stretch. She, who had not been born for hundreds of years, seemed to know how precious sunlight was. Lady Heavenly Sword, Liu Lei pays his respects. Seeing Heavenly Sword, Liu Lei bowed to her. Actually, as an immortal sword wielder, Liu Lei did not have to show any respect to a treasured sword wielder like Heavenly Sword. However, out of respect for the sword wielder, Liu Lei still bowed. "Congratulations on being born, Lady Heavenly Sword. Congratulations on being born, Lady Heavenly Sword." Seeing Liu Lei, an immortal sword wielder, bow, the rest of the people present did not dare to not pay their respects. Wouldn't that be embarrassing, Liu Lei? Because of that, everyone present bowed to the sky-reliant sword. Haha, everyone is so passionate. So passionate. The heaven-reliant sword was all smiles as she returned the greeting. She appeared to be very amiable and amiable. Heavenly Sword pays her respects to everyone. That's strange. Didn't they say that Lady Heavenly Sword was very difficult to get along with? Isn't she quite easy to talk to? She's quite polite. Everyone who knew about Heavenly Sword exchanged glances. She was different from the legendary Lady Heavenly Sword. "Heavenly Sword, I told you that I would have you in real life." Guhan, who had recovered from his petrified state, walked to Heavenly Sword's side weakly. This weakness was a special reaction after giving birth to a sword wielder. Compared to the poor pregnant women who needed to give birth for 1 or 2 months, Guhan only needed to be weak for 10 minutes. This was already considered fortunate. "Hero, do I know you? Do we know each other?" Heavenly Sword turned her head and looked at Guhan. "All right, let me introduce myself. My name is Guhan. From today onwards, I will be your sword wielder." Guhan extended a hand, wanting to shake hands with his sword wielder. TSK. Heavenly Sword ignored Guhan's outstretched hand. Instead, she walked around Guhan, paying particular attention to Guhan's face. She looked at it carefully a few times, almost looking at every detail on Guhan's face. Only then did she shake Guhan's hand. "Not bad, you look good. I'm very satisfied. You're much better than that sword wielder who was uglier than Liu Bei and disgusted me. From today onwards, I will protect you. You just have to do your job well and buy me a few dozen liters of good wine every day. You don't have to worry about anything else. Let's drink and sing, live a carefree and unrestrained life." After saying that, Heavenly Sword actually started singing. At this moment, everyone suddenly understood why Heavenly Sword's previous sword wielder had severed all ties with Heavenly Sword. They didn't know if it was lucky or unlucky to have such a sword wielder. Everyone looked at Ji Yuhan with pity in their eyes. Chapter 287. Little guy, you're pretty awesome. Seeing that Guhan had returned to normal, Liu Lei slowly walked in front of Guhan. Guhan greets Sword Immortal Cloudy Sky. When Guhan saw Liu Lei, he immediately bowed. This made Liu Lei's expression slightly better, but it was still very ugly. "All right, come with me to the discipline committee. Tell me, how should you deal with your crime of forcefully synchronizing?" Although Liu Lei didn't really want to lock up Guhan for a year or 2 because of his love for talent, it was still necessary for him to be locked up for a month or 2. It was also good to cut down this kid's spirit. This Guhan actually dared to violate Sword Pavilion's rules. If he didn't get a taste of his power, wouldn't this kid be able to ascend to the heavens in the future? TSK, I didn't think that the first thing this heroine does after coming out is see her sword bearer being taken to the discipline committee. TSK, this is really interesting. Yi Tian had unknowingly sat on the chandelier on the ceiling. She was swaying back and forth like she was sitting on a seesaw. Oh right, it seems like I used to go to the discipline committee with that ugly freak to play for a few days. Those old fogies in the discipline committee were really nice to this heroine. They treated me with good wine and good meat. I really miss it. Yi Tian said leisurely, causing the people under her to wonder what exactly Yi Tian and her sword wielder had done a few hundred years ago, treating a place as terrifying as the discipline committee of the Feng Shui sect as if it were a restaurant. Ahem. Liu Lei coughed. All right, you two, come with me. Senior Yun Xiao, it's naturally not a problem for me to go with you. But, why do you have to bring this kid to the discipline committee? Ji Yuhan had an expression of I don't understand, a look of being wronged. You don't understand? Liu Lei was so angry that his eyebrows were raised. He pointed at the guide and said, You, come here and tell him why he wants to go with me to the discipline committee. Yes. The guide walked over timidly. She was actually very reluctant to answer Liu Lei's question, because if she really answered, she would offend Guhan again. Previously, Guhan had only been an ancient sword-tier swordsman. Whether or not he could successfully synchronize himself to become a treasured sword-tier swordsman was still a big question mark. This guide had the backing of the sword pavilion, so he really wasn't afraid of Guhan. However, once Guhan became a treasure-grade sword wielder, and a treasure-grade sword wielder of the heavenly sword at that, things would be different. In front of a treasure sword wielder, he was nothing more than a fart. If the other party wanted to deliberately deal with him, there was no need to directly target him. Targeting his relatives and family would be enough to make him suffer for the rest of his life. However, this guide did not dare to not answer Liu Lei's question. What a joke! Liu Lei was an immortal sword saint rank, and he was also his superior. It would be absurd to offend him. Lord Guhan did not pay the hero coins and directly synchronized with Lady Heavenly Sword tier. This violated the rules of the sword pavilion. The guide first honestly recounted Guhan's sins, and then quickly added, This is also my fault. Firstly, I might not have explained it clearly, and Lord Guhan did not react in time. This is all my fault, all my fault. I have already covered for Lord Guhan and shouldered part of the responsibility. Now, Guhan should not be so petty as to bear a grudge against me, right? The guide thought silently. Actually, throughout the entire process, other than being a little bad-tempered and snobbish, this guide basically did not do anything wrong. She had done what needed to be done, and she had reminded Guhan of what needed to be done. She could be considered to have done her job. She should not have shouldered half of the responsibility and taken the initiative to take the blame. But she still took the initiative to bear it. This was the sorrow of a small fry. Ordinary people who did not become sword-bearers had to bear this sorrow. After all, their lives were built on the battle strength of sword-bearers. Everything had its own destiny. Seeing this guide say such words against her will and take the blame for Guhan, Wu Yu's face was full of helplessness and grievance. Ji Yuhan felt bored in his heart. Acting cool was not as enjoyable as it was said to be. All right, you can go. This has nothing to do with you. You already reminded me before I touched Heavenly Sword. You have already done your job. You did not do anything wrong, Guhan said. The guide did not know what to say. She could only look at Guhan with a face full of gratitude. The hatred and disgust she had for Guhan instantly disappeared without a trace. She even treated Guhan as a very good person. It was clearly Guhan who caused her to be in this situation, but she was sincerely grateful to Guhan. It was because Guhan had helped her and not pushed her. Many years later, when this guide was old, she would take a large poster of Guhan and show it to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She would proudly tell them that their grandmother had spoken dozens of words to Guhan and received help from Guhan. This made the younger generation feel sincere admiration and envy towards their grandmother. All right, let's not talk about the topic anymore. Back in the sword pavilion. Liu Lei looked at this scene with a chuckle. After Guhan asked the guide to leave, he said, What, you admit your guilt? You can come with me to the disciplinary committee now, right? I still can't go. Guhan shook his head and rejected Liu Lei once again. Heh, I'm going to be angry now. Liu Lei angrily put his hands on his hips. Brat, this old man is a dignified immortal sword wielder. Every second, I earn a few hundred hero coins. King dare to fool me? I wouldn't dare. How would I dare to wash away Sir Sword Immortal's name? It's just that I really didn't break the Sword Pavilion's rules. I followed the rules. Guhan smiled and raised his arm. Senior Yun Xiao, I have a message to send to your terminal. You'll understand why I didn't break the Sword Pavilion's rules after you read it. Alright, I want to see what you're capable of. Liu Lei and Guhan touched each other's terminals and became friends with Guhan. Guhan was in luck this time. He actually became friends with an immortal sword wielder. This was equivalent to becoming friends with a member of the Politburo before the apocalypse. If you showed off your WeChat and showed that you were friends with XX Shi or XX Li, you could brag about it for the rest of your life. However, Liu Lei was only the second immortal sword wielder friend in Guhan's contact list. The first was Wuzhang Shifang. After all, he had promised Guhan that as long as he fulfilled the conditions, he would take Guhan as his disciple. It was necessary to leave a contact number for easy communication. After adding Guhan as a friend, Guhan sent a picture to Liu Lei. When Liu Lei saw the picture, his expression changed several times. In the end, he had no choice but to nod. All right. Although I'm very unhappy, you really didn't break the Sword Pavilion's rules. Hearing Liu Lei's words, everyone began to whisper among themselves. Just what kind of news would make the pavilion master unhappy but still approve of Ji Yuhan's actions? Could it be something from Sword Maiden Online? Suddenly, someone had a flash of inspiration. Isn't there another rule in the Sword Pavilion? If you can successfully synchronize with this Sword Maiden in the game, then you can waive the hero coin fee. Oh right, how could I forget that? Realization dawned on everyone. According to the Sword Pavilion's rules, if you wanted to synchronize with a top Sword Maiden, you had to either hand over a hero coin or successfully synchronize with the Sword Maiden in the game. Most sword wielders used hero coins to synchronize with each other. Very few people used sword maidens in the game. Therefore, many people would forget about this rule. For example, the guide had completely forgotten about this rule. If she had remembered better, she would have asked Guhan about the game, and things would not have turned out this way. Fortunately, only a few people who had fought with Guhan knew that military governor had the heavenly sword in the game. Most people did not know that the military governor's sword maiden was the heavenly sword. Those who were present rarely played games. Some of them did not even know who the military governor was. No one associated Guhan with the military governor. Senior Yun Xiao, since I didn't break the Sword Pavilion's rules, I'll take my leave. Guhan, who had successfully obtained the heavenly sword, prepared to leave the Sword Pavilion. It was exciting to show off and then run. Wait. Liu Lei muttered. You can't leave yet. The heavenly sword maiden is very important. I have something to tell you. Come to my office. Yes. Guhan did not hesitate and immediately obeyed Liu Lei's order. How could he reject an immortal sword wielder's invitation to his office? It did not seem like a bad thing. Under everyone's envious gaze, Guhan followed behind Liu Lei and slowly walked to the elevator on the second floor. Then, he used the elevator and went straight to the sixth floor, where Liu Lei's office was. According to the standard construction model of the Sword Pavilion, the first floor was where the ancient sword maidens were stored. The second floor was for treasured swords, and so on. The third floor was for famed swords, the fourth floor was for spiritual swords, the fifth floor was for immortal swords, and the sixth floor was for emperor swords. The security on each floor was stricter than the one before. As the Sword Tower Master, he had set up his office on the sixth floor, alone with the Emperor Sword. This way, if anyone wanted to take the Emperor Sword, they would have to get past Liu Lei, a Celestial Sword tier sword wielder. Unless it was an Emperor Sword tier sword wielder, a Flood tier or a Desolate tier Yuanshan, it was impossible. Liu Lei's office was very large, but the layout was very simple. There weren't any fancy decorations, only thick books. Ji Yuhan noticed that many of the books were protected by high-tech bookshelves. Books that needed to be protected by high-tech protective equipment should all be precious books from before the apocalypse. For example, Guhan noticed that there was a book called 3 Years of Simulation of 5 Years of College Entrance Examination, Mathematics in an Obvious Position. This was a rare treasure, and there were less than 10 of them left in the world. If someone passed one down to their descendants and sold it, they would not have to work for 200 years. I don't have many hobbies, but I like to collect these books. The mistakes we humans made in the past were too stupid. We descendants tried our best, but we only recovered 7 to 8%. Sigh. This was the first thing Liu Lei said after entering the office. Sit. Liu Lei pointed at a chair in the room. This was the second thing he said. From now on, you are my disciple. This was the third thing he said. Chapter 288. Hearing Liu Lei's words, Guhan did not answer for a long time, so Liu Lei repeated what he had just said. From now on, you are my disciple. This time, Guhan was completely annoyed. 2 days ago, he had shamelessly asked Wuzhang Shifang to accept him as a disciple, but Wuzhang Shifang had very arrogantly said that he had to get first place in the 8 Academies tournament before he could become his disciple. In the end, in just 2 days, an immortal sword-tier sword wielder had taken the initiative to say that he was willing to accept Guhan as a disciple. To be honest, in terms of the quality of a master, Wuzhang Shifang was better than Liu Lei. Firstly, Wuzhang Shifang was ranked 5th among the immortal sword-tier sword wielder, while Liu Lei was only ranked 11th. In terms of strength, Liu Lei was not as good as Wuzhang Shifang. Secondly, Wuzhang Shifang was young enough. He was only in his early 50s. With the physical quality of an immortal sword-tier sword wielder, as long as he did not die in the hands of Yuan Ku, it would not be a problem for him to live for another 30 or 40 years. In that case, Wuzhang Shifang could protect himself for 30 or 40 years. In contrast, Liu Lei was already old. Looking at his physical condition, it would be difficult for him to live for another 3 or 5 years. Thirdly, Wuzhang Shifang had Hao Tian Zhendi behind him. At a critical moment, he might even be able to form a relationship with Zhendi. This would make his safety much more reliable. However, Liu Lei was a loner, and it was said that his relationship with Sword Immortal Baiju was only SOSO. Although there were so many benefits to becoming Wuzhang Shifang's disciple, in his heart, Guhan was more than willing to become Liu Lei's disciple. Guhan had always been a proud person, and Wuzhang Shifang's test made Guhan feel a knot in his heart. However, because he could not find a second immortal sword-tier sword wielder to get to know him, Guhan had to endure Wuzhang Shifang's test. However, things were different now. Sword Immortal Liu Lei had actually taken the initiative to take Guhan as his disciple. His attitude was more than 10 times better than Zhang Shifang's. Naturally, Guhan was willing to take Liu Lei as his master. However, before that, Guhan still wanted to know why Liu Lei would suddenly take him as his disciple. Senior Yun Xiao is too kind. Guhan is overwhelmed by the favor. Guhan first gave a deep bow to Liu Lei, and then said, "It's just that Guhan really doesn't understand. How did Guhan receive Senior's favor? Senior, please tell me the truth. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep at night. Kid, are you afraid that I, Liu Lei, will harm you?" Liu Lei cursed unhappily. "Fine, there's no harm in telling you, lest you have any problems with me, your master, in the future. Kid, do you know what the difficult sword era is?" Suddenly, Liu Lei asked Guhan this question. Difficult sword era. When Guhan heard these 4 words, information regarding the difficult sword era quickly appeared in his mind. The so-called difficult sword era referred to the gradual decrease in the number of sword-bearers in history. The new sword-bearers could not keep up with the dead sword-bearers. At the same time, there was a severe shortage of high-level Zhendi sword-bearers. This era was called the difficult sword era. Generally speaking, there were 2 criteria to determine whether an era had reached the difficult sword era. The first was that the number of new sword-bearers was less than 10%, and the second was that the number of Zhendi sword-bearers was less than 2. If these 2 criteria were met, it could basically be determined that the era had reached the difficult sword era. Just like the ancient book The Drama of the Three Kingdoms, the general trend of the world would be divided after being united for a long time, and united for a long time. It was the same for the difficult sword era. Every 200 to 300 years, humans would inexplicably usher in the difficult sword era. Before today, humans had encountered a total of 3 difficult sword eras. Thinking about it carefully, didn't the last difficult sword era end 230 years ago? In this way, the timing matched. When Guhan suddenly heard that the difficult sword era was about to arrive, his expression changed. This was an absolute secret to the Sword Council. It was a secret that no one could tell. Once the news of the difficult sword era was spread to Yuan-ku, humans would definitely face a tragic war. Senior, it's better for juniors not to know about this kind of thing. Ji Han did not want to know about this news, because once he knew, he would definitely be on the Sword Council's watch list. There might even be people monitoring his communication all the time to prevent him from divulging the news of the difficult sword era. It doesn't matter. You are my disciple. You are qualified to know about this. Liu Lei seemed to want to tell Guhan everything he knew. In fact, according to the statistics, the growth rate of the sword-bearers last year was -6.87%. Although this year's statistics haven't come out yet, according to the statistics of our Yuzhang Sword Council, the growth rate in the first half of this year has dropped to -7.8%. It is estimated that it will break through -8% this year. And now, there are only 2 Gendi, Longsha Gendi and Haotian Gendi. In other words, the whole world will officially enter the difficult sword era in less than 5 years. The whole world will officially enter the difficult sword era in 5 years at the latest. This sentence instantly exploded in Guhan's mind. Guhan could never imagine that the difficult sword era would start from next year. This was the news that humans were most unwilling to hear. This meant that in the next 20 to 50 years, humans would face the greatest suffering in 300 years. Yes, the difficult sword era was the most difficult era for humans. Because of the large decrease in the number of sword-bearers, humans had to give up a large number of strongholds outside the cities because they did not have enough strength to defend these strongholds. If they forcibly divided their manpower to guard these strongholds, they would only lose their already limited strength. Therefore, humans simply chose to give up the strongholds outside the cities during the difficult sword era and focused on defending the various base cities. They were looking forward to the end of the difficult sword era. Corresponding to the difficult sword era, the Yuan-ku would enter a very active state. They would seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to launch a tide-like attack on the human base cities. At that time, most of the base cities would only be guarded by the pitiful immortal sword-level sword-bearers. Once they were attacked by the flood or desolate-level Yuan-ku, it would simply be a massacre. Every time the difficult sword era occurred, there would be news of a few base cities that could not hold on. The cities would be completely breached, and a large number of sword-bearers would die. Almost all the civilians would die. Yes, when the sword-bearers could no longer defend the city, they could use the power of the sword lady to escape to another base city. However, the civilians could only be heartlessly abandoned in the city's shelter. If they were lucky, they might be able to hide in the shelter for a few decades, waiting for the difficult sword era to pass. If they were unlucky, they could only die. Oh yes, by the way, 99.9% of the civilians were the unlucky ones. There had been a total of 3 difficult sword eras. During the second difficult sword era, Yuzhang City, which did not have any emperor sword-bearers, was unfortunately breached. All the humans in the city were basically killed. Only some of the family members of the sword-bearers were moved to Yangjing City in advance, which saved their lives. When the difficult sword era passed and Yuzhang City was restored, it took a full 100 years to encourage fertility before the population returned to normal. Therefore, the difficult sword era was a disaster for the sword-bearers. For the civilians, it was even more of a disaster. How could it be so fast? There were no signs at all. Guhan mumbled to himself. Everything had happened too suddenly. The signs have been there for a long time. 5 years ago, we foresaw that the difficult sword era was coming. However, at that time, we estimated that there were still about 15 years before the difficult sword era. Unexpectedly, in less than 5 years, the time has advanced by a whole third. We are about to welcome the arrival of this terrible era. Liu Lei let out a long sigh. What's more frightening is that Hao Tianjendi might not be able to hold on for more than 5 years. At that time, the entire human race will only have Longsha Jendi, and that is Jendi. Even in the previous 3 difficult sword eras, during the worst times, we humans had 2 Jendi. However, now that we have entered the difficult sword era, humans will only have 1 Jendi. This time's difficult sword era will probably be the difficult sword era with the most casualties in human history. Liu Lei's eyes were filled with endless worry. Among the 8 base cities, Yangjing City has the deepest heritage and produced the most Jendi. In the previous 3 difficult sword eras, Yangjing City had the protection of a Jendi. Therefore, Yangjing City did not suffer too much during the difficult sword era. But this time, even Yangjing City has lost the protection of the Sword Emperor. If things go wrong, the people of the Chinese bloodline might have to bear a terrifying calamity. Why are you telling me this? Guhan raised his head and stared at Liu Lei. These things are not things that an ancient sword wielder like me should know. Senior, why are you telling me this? First of all, let me correct a mistake of yours. You are no longer an ancient sword wielder. You are now a treasured sword wielder. Liu Lei was actually in the mood to crack a joke. You asked me why I am telling you this. Let me tell you, because I think highly of you. In other words, I think highly of the military governor. Military governor. Hearing this name, Guhan suddenly raised his head and looked at Liu Lei in disbelief. How did he know that he was the military governor? Don't be surprised, Guhan. Liu Lei patted Jiu Han's shoulder. This old man's greatest pleasure is to grind dungeons in Sword Maiden Online and get shards and whatnot. Coincidentally, I have a good friend's son who was tricked into joining the Yaoguang sword faction. It's not difficult to know that the military governor has a heavenly sword. It just so happened that you sent this message to me. This is fate. Hearing this, Guhan was speechless. It turned out that he had delivered himself to Liu Lei's doorstep. However, just because of his identity as the military governor, did Liu Lei think so highly of him? No matter how high his achievements were, they were only achievements in the game and had nothing to do with reality. Why did Liu Lei think so highly of him? There must be something that he was not clear about. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.